Chapter 336. Upon hearing Taoist Tianji's suggestion, the Tianjian sect master frowned. He shook his head without hesitation and said with a solemn expression, "We can't do that. Over the years, no matter what conflicts there are between the 8 sects, they have to be harmonious on the surface. We can't really have a falling out. If Ji Tianqing Yunyao come to our sect to celebrate my birthday and we take the opportunity to kill them, that's not ethical at all. At that time, not only will we have to bear the wrath of the Sky Pillar sect and fight them head-on, but we will also be criticized and besieged by the other sects." At this point, the Tianjian sect master paused and said with a bitter voice, "Most importantly, with our sect's strength and foundation, we can't fight the Sky Pillar sect head-on." Taoist Tianji frowned and sneered in his heart. He thought with disdain, lowly humans are hypocrites. The Tianjian sect master dreams of destroying the Sky Pillar sect and replacing it as the #1 sect in the Tianshan region. There's clearly a great opportunity in front of him to destroy the 2 genius disciples of the Sky Pillar sect, but he still has to care about morality. If it were us demons, we would have killed all the disciples and elders of the Sky Pillar sect long ago. However, although he thought this in his heart, he still had to remain calm and indifferent on the surface. He smiled confidently and said to the Tianjian sect master in a low voice, "Sect master, of course I understand your concerns. How can we kill Ji Tianqing Yunyao so brazenly? If we provoke the Sky Pillar sect and fight with our sect head-on, it will definitely affect our plan. Killing the 2 of them will only cripple Chu Tianqing's right-hand men. I've already thought of an idea that will smoothly eliminate the 2 of them and won't cause a decisive battle between the 2 sects." Taoist Tianji then used his spiritual sense to transmit his plan to the Tianjian sect master. The Tianjian sect master frowned and listened. His expression gradually eased. After listening to Taoist Tianji's plan, he immediately revealed a satisfied smile and nodded repeatedly, "Good. Very good. Taoist Tianji's plan is indeed ingenious. If that's the case, then let's do it this way." The head of the Tianjian sect repeatedly applauded. He exchanged a glance with the Taoist priest Tianji, and both of them revealed a complacent sneer. For 4 consecutive days, Ji Tianqing cultivated in seclusion in the secret chamber. He consumed more than 20 spirit fruits that he had obtained from the 7 Stars Pagoda and refined all the remaining star force in his body. With the help of the spiritual fruits and the power of the stars, he cultivated hard for 2 days and refined 2 more acupoints. After the refinement of the 8 apertures of the 7th sword vein was completed, he naturally reached LV8 Tongxian stage. Now that 4 days had passed, Ji Tianqing's strength had greatly increased, and his aura had become even more mysterious and powerful. At dawn on the 5th day, he ended his cultivation and walked out of the secret room. Today was the birthday of the Tianjian sect's leader. He was going to rush to the Tianjian sect with Yunyao and Yen. He washed up and changed into a brand new white robe. Then, he rode Xianyu and left the Tianqing courtyard. Previously, he had made an appointment with Yunyao and Yen to meet at the square at the foot of towering Sky Peak at dawn. When he arrived at the square at the foot of the mountain on Xianyu, he saw that Yunyao and Yen had already arrived and were waiting for him. Yunyao stood on the back of the white spirit crane, and Yen rode on the wildfire white tiger. Ji Tianqing greeted the 2 of them and rode Xianyu into the sky. He followed behind Yunyao's spirit crane and flew toward the Tianjian sect. Unfortunately, Yen's wildfire white tiger could not fly. It could only run on the ground. However, the wildfire white tiger was a spirit beast that had condensed a demon core. Its strength was comparable to a 2nd or 3rd level origin core stage powerhouse. Even if it ran wildly on the ground, crossing mountains and crossing rivers, its speed was still extremely fast. It would not fall behind by much. The distance from the Sky Pillar sect to the Tianjian sect was more than 800 miles. Ji Tianqing's group of 3 only used 5 hours to arrive at the foot of the Tianjian sect. It was currently 9 in the morning, and there was still an hour before noon. There would be 2 birthday banquets today. One would be at noon, and the other would be at night. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's group of 3 hurried over according to the time. The time they arrived was just right. It was neither too early nor too late. At the foot of the Tianjian sect's mountain gate stood 2 rows of valiant and exuberant white-robed disciples. All of them carried treasured swords on their backs. Their entire bodies emitted a confident and valiant vitality. 2 elders and a few deacons stood at the foot of the mountain gate to welcome guests. They were brimming with enthusiasm as they greeted the guests. Ji Tianqing's group of 3 calmly put away their spirit beasts and strode across the square in front of the mountain gate. They followed the crowd in front of them as they walked towards the mountain gate. Coincidentally, the group of people walking in front of them was from the Thousand Autumns sect. The leader of the group was the Thousand Autumns sect master. Beside him were 2 elders and the head disciple, Qiao Xian. 8 days ago, Qiao Xian had been severely injured by Ji Tianqing at the foot of the 7 Stars Pagoda. After 8 days of recuperation, his injuries had mostly recovered. There was nothing out of the ordinary on the outside. It was just that his strength had not fully recovered. The Thousand Autumns sect master led the 2 elders and Qiao Xian to the foot of the mountain gate. The 2 elders of the Tianjian sect immediately greeted them warmly. After exchanging a few pleasantries, the Thousand Autumns sect master stepped through the mountain gate with a smile on his face. He led Qiao Xian and the 2 elders up the Divine Sword Peak. At this moment, Qiao Xian discovered Ji Tianqing's presence. Qiao Xian's expression immediately changed. His eyes flashed with a sharp light as he glared at Ji Tianqing with resentment. Qiao Xian whispered something into the Thousand Autumns sect master's ear. The Thousand Autumns sect master turned his head to look at Ji Tianqing with an indifferent gaze. However, the Thousand Autumns sect master did not stop. His expression did not change as he led the 2 elders and Qiao Xian up the Divine Sword Peak. Ji Tianqing saw this scene, but he did not take it to heart. He did not need to guess to know that Qiao Xian and the Thousand Autumns sect master were up to no good. At this moment, Yun Yao showed her invitation to the 2 elders at the foot of the mountain gate. Her expression was calm as she said, "The head disciple of the Sky Pillar sect, Yun Yao, has brought 2 sect masters' disciples to represent the Sky Pillar sect in offering birthday congratulations." The smiles on the faces of the 2 Tianjian sect elders immediately disappeared. They frowned as they looked at Yun Yao and asked, "This is an invitation from our sect to your esteemed sect master. Why isn't your esteemed sect master here? Why did he only send the 3 of you?" Yun Yao had already expected that the Tianjian sect elders would have such a reaction. She replied expressionlessly, "Our sect master has important matters to attend to, so he can't come in person. He sent us as his representatives." The 2 elders of the Heavenly Sword sect were displeased and somewhat angry. However, the 2 of them did not show it on their faces. They nodded slightly and said, "If that's the case, please come in and take a seat in the Divine Sword Peak's main hall." Yun Yao cupped her hands and bowed. She led Ji Tianqing and Yen through the mountain gate and walked up the Divine Sword Peak. Immediately after, the true martial sect master led the head disciple to the foot of the mountain gate. The 2 Tianjian sect elders hurriedly greeted them with smiles and exchanged pleasantries with the true martial sect master. The true martial sect master said a few polite words. Then, he looked at the backs of Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao and sneered in a playful tone, The Sky Pillar sect is getting more and more arrogant. Today is your esteemed sect master's 200th birthday. It's such an important event, but Chu Tianqing refused to come. He simply doesn't put your esteemed sect in his eyes." The 2 Tianjian sect elders' expressions changed slightly. A hint of anger flashed in their eyes. They also thought so in their hearts. However, there were too many people at the foot of the mountain gate. It was inconvenient for them to say anything. They just pretended not to hear anything. The true martial sect master smiled. He led the head disciple through the mountain gate and left with a smile on his face. Chapter 337. After crossing the mountain gate, there was a wide stone road that led to the reception hall at the top of the Divine Sword Peak. The road was decorated with lanterns and colored banners on both sides of the road, revealing a festive atmosphere. Many disciples of the Tianjin sect walked past in a hurry. They were busy with all kinds of trivial matters for the sect leader's birthday. The guests from various sects and places walked in groups of 2s and 3s. They walked leisurely to the top of the mountain. Many people looked at the scenery of the Tianjin sect as they walked. They were talking with smiles on their faces. The sect leaders and disciples of various sects would greet each other after they met. They would stop and chat for a while. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were a little lonely. There were no deacons of the Tianjin sect coming to greet them, nor were there people from other sects and forces coming to flatter them. The three of them were not in the mood to appreciate the scenery of the Tianjin sect. They walked through the crowd with indifferent expressions, climbed to the top of the mountain, and entered the reception hall. 2 elders of the Tianjin sect stood at the entrance of the hall to greet the guests. One of them was responsible for receiving the gifts, and the other was responsible for recording the list of gifts. Yin Yao took out a few gift boxes from her space ring and handed them to the elders who were responsible for receiving the gifts. Then, she led Ji Tianqing and Yen into the hall. Dozens of guests had already arrived in the hall. They were gathered in groups of 3 or 5. They were either whispering or exchanging greetings with each other. Ji Tianqing glanced at the people in the hall and saw that most of them were not from the 8 sections. They should be the leaders of various small forces and forces in Yanling City. For these people from the second and third-rate forces, the birthday of the Tianjin sect leader was undoubtedly the best opportunity for them to curry favor with the Tianjin sect. Yin Yao and Ji Tianqing sat in a quiet corner. They were not conspicuous or eye-catching. Other than Yen, who occasionally asked some questions out of curiosity, the 3 of them were silent and silently observed the situation around them. After a while, the people from the Xinyu sect arrived. Only 2 people from the Heart Moon sect came. Coincidentally, Ji Tianqing knew both of them. One of them was a graceful, dignified, and elegant beautiful woman. She was the great elder of the Heart Moon sect, Jun Yi. She was also Xian's concubine. Back then, during Ji Tianqing's apprenticeship ceremony, Jun Yi had personally paid him a visit and gave him a gift. The beauty in a white dress following beside Jun Yi was precisely the Heart Moon sect's head disciple, Feng Min. After Jun Yi and Feng Min entered the lobby, their eyes scanned the lobby and landed on Yun Yao and Ji Tianqing. The 2 of them quickly walked over and greeted Ji Tianqing and the other 2. After greeting each other and exchanging a few pleasantries, Jun Yi and Feng Min sat down beside Ji Tianqing. This time, when the Heart Moon sect came to celebrate the birthday, Granny Shui Yu did not come personally. Instead, she sent First Elder Jun Yi as a representative. Although Jun Yi had explained that Granny Shui Yu was old and it was inconvenient for her to travel long distances. However, Ji Tianqing could guess the real reason. The Heart Moon sect had always been on the same page as the Sky Pillar sect. If Chu Tianxing did not come to celebrate the birthday, as an elder, Granny Shui Yu would not come personally. The Sky Sword sect master's 200th birthday was extremely old. It sounded extremely frightening. In fact, a Heaven Prime expert had a lifespan of 400 to 500 years. The 200-year-old Tianjin sect's master was just a young boy in front of Granny Shui Yu. After all, Granny Shui Yu had lived for nearly 400 years and was a veritable elder. Not long after, the sect master of the 6 He sect and the head disciple, Wu Yu, also entered the lobby. The sect master of the 6 He sect was immediately surrounded by the leaders of several second-rate forces. He was flattered by everyone and had no choice but to exchange pleasantries with everyone. When Wu Yu saw Ji Tianqing and the others, his eyes lit up and he quickly walked over. Senior sister Yun Yao, junior brother Ji, how have you been? Wu Yu smiled and cupped his hands in greeting. After greeting the 2, he also greeted Junyi and Feng Min. After everyone exchanged greetings, Wu Yu sat down next to Ji Tianqing. He looked at Ji Tianqing with bright eyes and asked excitedly and expectantly, Junior brother Ji, I heard that after we left that day, you fought with Qiao Xian and Wang Tong again? Hearing this question, Feng Min also became interested. Her eyes shone with a strange light and she asked Ji Tianqing with a smile, "Junior brother Ji, I heard that you taught Xiao Xian a lesson. Is that true?" Ji Tianqing could not help but raise his eyebrows and asked in a relaxed tone, "How do you know about this?" At that time, it was only me and the three of them. "Oh." Wu Yu smiled meaningfully and said, "In that case, junior brother Ji, you admit it." Feng Min's eyes shone with a strange light and she said with a faint smile, "Junior brother Ji, what happened that day? Hurry up and tell us." Yan was very interested in this kind of thing, especially news about Ji Tianqing and other sex geniuses. He looked at Ji Tianqing curiously and urged in a low voice, "Senior brother Tianqing, quickly tell us. I want to hear it too." Although Yin Yao did not speak and her face was still as calm as water, her eyes were looking at Ji Tianqing. Obviously, she was also interested in this matter. Even Junyi, who was sitting among the crowd, revealed a look of anticipation as she stared at Ji Tianqing. Junyi was the great elder of the Heart Moon sect and often went in and out of the Sky Pillar sect. She was more familiar with Yun Yao and had a good impression of Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing saw that the people around him were not outsiders and nodded slightly. "Actually, it's not a big deal. I'll just briefly explain it. That day, I threw Shi Wenyu out of the 7 Stars Pagoda and he ended up in a miserable state. Xiao Xian and the 2 disciples of the True Martial sect and the Wind Fire sect wanted to fight for Shi Wenyu, so they threatened him. He lowered his voice and told them what happened that day." When Junyi, Feng Min, and Wu Yu heard this, they immediately revealed looks of surprise and looked at him in disbelief. Yan clapped and cheered excitedly, "Second senior brother is so amazing." Even Yun Yao's clear eyes flashed with a faint smile as she looked at Ji Tianqing. She knew Ji Tianqing's strength and realm, and she also knew that Ji Tianqing had gained a lot in the 7 Stars Pagoda and his strength had greatly increased. Just as Ji Tianqing, Feng Min, and the others were chatting in low voices and were having a good time. On the other side of the hall, there were a few pairs of cold eyes silently staring at Ji Tianqing and the others. These were 4 young disciples who were sitting together and discussing in low voices. Their faces were a little gloomy. The leader of the 4 was Shi Wenyu, followed by Xiao Xian of the Thousand Autumns sect, Wang Tong of the True Martial sect, and Song Zhong of the Wind Fire sect. Xiao Xian lowered his voice and told Shi Wenyu what happened that day under the 7 Stars Pagoda. When he spoke of his anger, he glanced coldly at Ji Tianqing across the hall, and his hatred was almost uncontrollable. "The 3 of us wanted to warn Ji Tianqing not to be too arrogant, but we didn't expect him to seriously injure me. Senior brother Wenyu, that bastard Ji Tianqing is too arrogant. He came to your Tianjian sect and still doesn't know how to restrain himself. He's still proudly showing off to Feng Min and the others. He deserves to die." Shi Wenyu frowned and sneered. "Don't worry. Since he dares to come to our Tianjian sect, he won't have an easy time." Chapter 338. Not long after, it was noon, and the birthday banquet began. The Tianjian sect had been preparing for today's birthday banquet since a month ago. The birthday banquet was very sumptuous. All kinds of exotic delicacies were served together with fine wine and rare spirit fruits. This not only showed the generosity of the Tianjian sect, but also showed the foundation and strength of the sect. Many leaders of the second and third-rate forces, as well as people from several sects close to the Tianjian sect, were drinking and talking to each other. Although the weakest martial artists present were at the metaphysical realm, they could already abstain from eating. But when faced with all kinds of spirit fruits and fine wine, they would taste them. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao casually ate some dishes, drank a few mouthfuls of spirit wine, and then left the banquet. The birthday banquet at noon was a little simpler. The birthday banquet at night was the main event, and the host of the Tianjian sect would come out to make an appearance. After Ji Tianqing and the other 2 left the reception hall, they strolled aimlessly on the peak of the mountain. This time, they came to the Tianjian sect not only to send gifts to the banquet, but also to complete the instructions of sect leader Chu Tiansheng. They tried their best to find out the details of the Tianjian sect. After walking down the peak of the mountain, the three of them separated. Yinyao walked to the east alone, and Ji Tianqing and Yan walked to the back of the mountain. On the surface, it seemed that the three of them were strolling around and enjoying the scenery of the Divine Sword Peak. But in fact, the three of them were observing the surroundings with keen eyes and using their spiritual senses to eavesdrop on some of the disciples' conversations. The terrain of the back of the Divine Sword Peak was very steep and dangerous, and there were even a few rugged cliffs with strange rocks. There were a few small open spaces halfway up the mountain, where several palaces and houses were built. Surprisingly, half of the palaces and houses were in the open space, and the other half were suspended in the air. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that the floating palaces and mansions were supported by huge beams and pillars. Furthermore, there were formations set up around them. In this way, the palaces and houses looked thrilling and strange, and had a special charm. Living in those houses, one could enjoy the surrounding scenery and experience the feeling of living above the cliff. Yan lived in the palace of the fire race when he was young. The culture of the fire race was slightly different from that of the human race. Not long after he entered the sky-bearing sect, he was sent to the boundless cave by Chu Tianqing to sleep. Therefore, Yan was somewhat unfamiliar with many things of the human race. When he saw the mansions and palaces, he couldn't help but become interested. He moved closer to take a few more glances. Ji Tianqing naturally wouldn't stop him, so he accompanied him to watch. However, every palace and courtyard was guarded by guards, and no one was allowed to enter. The two of them could only watch from the outside and could not enter the courtyard or the palace. Yan looked around and observed for a while, and then her interest gradually faded. She pulled Ji Tianqing to go somewhere else. At this time, in a room on the third floor of a suspended palace, a pair of cold eyes were looking at the back of Ji Tianqing and Yan through the window grill. This pair of eyes was slightly bigger than an ordinary person, and there was a faint dark red color in the bottom of the eyes. It was filled with a cold light that was filled with killing intent. Its owner was a tall and graceful woman wearing a black robe, a cloak, and a black veil. She stood in front of the window and stared at Ji Tianqing's back. Her eyes were filled with a cold light, and her body was emitting a dense killing intent. Swish! She suddenly turned and walked to the door as fast as the wind. However, just as she opened the door and was about to rush out of the room, a white-robed figure blocked the door and stopped her. The person who came was an old man with white hair and a white beard. It was Taoist priest Tianji. He looked at the black-robed woman seriously and asked in the language of the demon race, "Princess, what do you want to do?" The black-robed woman was Princess Blood Moon. When she saw Taoist priest Tianji, she temporarily suppressed her killing intent and said in a low voice, "Ji Tianqing actually came to the back mountain. This is a great opportunity. I want to catch him, princess, don't be rash." Taoist priest Tianji hurriedly closed the door and said in a serious tone, "Now, the 8 sects and experts from all over the world have gathered on the Divine Sword Peak. If you try to catch Ji Tianqing, you will definitely expose your aura and attract the experts from all over the world." Princess Blood Moon also understood this. She couldn't help but frown and shouted in a low voice, "Then what should I do? Do I have to watch him escape again and again? High Priest, I have already stayed here for more than a month. I can't even leave this palace. How long do I have to wait?" Taoist priest Tianji hurriedly persuaded her, "Princess, a little impatience will spoil a great plan. For the sake of our revenge, please be patient. Moreover, I have already discussed with the sect leader of the Tianjian sect. We will take action tonight. At that time, we will definitely be able to take Ji Tianqing's life." Hearing this, a bright light flashed in the eyes of the Blood Moon Infanta, and she calmed down. When Taoist priest Tianji saw that she didn't say anything else, he said, "Princess, you can stay here and wait for the news. I still have things to do." After saying this, he took his leave. Princess Blood Moon stood in front of the window. She looked through the window and watched Ji Tianqing's back disappear into the distance. The corners of her mouth curved into a bloodthirsty sneer. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao strolled around the Tianjian sect for an entire afternoon. The three of them walked past several mountain peaks and observed countless people, houses, and palaces. Apart from being familiar with the structure of the Tianjian sect, they didn't manage to obtain any useful information. After all, the Tianjian sect must have taken precautions and wouldn't allow outsiders to easily get hold of their weakness. During this time, Ji Tianqing also met countless disciples of the Tianjian sect. Most of the disciples had a trace of hostility in their eyes when they saw him wearing the white robe of the Sky Pillar sect. He could see that the Tianjian sect had a deep enmity towards the Sky Pillar sect. This wasn't just the thought of the Tianjian sect master and elders. Even the ordinary disciples had the same thought. He knew that this was a very dangerous signal. The Tianjian sect and the Sky Pillar sect would probably have a war in the near future. Unknowingly, night fell. More guests arrived and entered the guest hall at the peak of the Divine Sword Peak. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao returned to the reception hall and waited for the banquet to begin. The reception hall was brightly lit and filled with colorful lights. Countless young and beautiful maids entered the reception hall, carrying delicacies and fine wine. On the high platform, there were women dressed in thin sandals. They danced to the music of the string and woodwind instruments, displaying their graceful and moving figures. When the banquet began, the master of the Tianjian sect finally made his appearance. He walked into the reception hall and greeted the guests. Spiritual Master Tianji, Guest Elder Huangfu, Shi Wenyu, and several other elders of the Tianjian sect also entered the reception hall and toasted the guests. The reception hall immediately became lively and clamorous. Cheers and laughter could be heard everywhere. However, Ji Tianqing could feel that the master of the Tianjian sect, Shi Wenyu, and the others had cast several sharp and cold glances at him while he was drinking with his head lowered. Chapter 339. Ji Tianqing, Yunyao, and Yan sat at the same table. The three of them casually ate some spirit fruits and occasionally drank a few mouthfuls of spirit wine. They whispered a few words from time to time, unlike the guests at other tables who were noisy. They all planned to eat something casually and find a suitable opportunity to leave after the birthday boy, the Tianjian sect master, finished his speech. There was no need to eat this kind of awkward banquet, where everyone had their own thoughts. They would feel awkward if they stayed in the hall for a while. Not long after, the Tianjian sect master walked up to the high platform and clapped his hands to signal the singers and dancers to leave. His face was ruddy, and he spoke in a loud voice. He first modestly said a few words, and then he thanked all the guests. When the Tianjian sect master said, "Everyone, please drink to your heart's content," Ji Tianqing and the others thought his speech was about to end. However, no one expected the Tianjian sect master to continue. "It's rare for everyone to get together. Today, if it weren't for my birthday, you wouldn't have gathered here. We are all martial artists, and we are all outstanding martial artists in the Tianshan region. Naturally, my birthday banquet will not be like the ordinary people's, where there will only be wine, meat, and singing and dancing. There will also be some wonderful performances to liven things up." Hearing this, the dozens of guests in the hall all stopped eating and drinking and turned to look at the Tianjian sect master. Everyone was a little confused. What exactly was the wonderful performance the Tianjian sect master was talking about? Seeing that everyone's attention was attracted, the Tianjian sect master couldn't help but smile and say, "I have a suggestion. Tonight, the chief disciples of the 8 sects will gather together. This is a grand event that only happens once every 3 years. Taking advantage of this grand event, let the elite geniuses of each sect exchange pointers and learn from each other. This will not only enhance the friendship between the sects, but also allow everyone to feast their eyes on it. What do you think?" Upon hearing this, many of the guests from the second and third-rate forces applauded excitedly. There was a huge gap between them and the 8 sections. They could only look up to the majesty and glory of the 8 sections. Of course, they were eager to see the disciples of the 8 sects compete with each other. After all, the chief disciples of the 8 sects were all masters on the star list. They were the most outstanding martial arts geniuses in the Tianshan region. Only in the ranking of stars competition every 3 years would the elite disciples of the various sects compete on the same stage. However, people from second and third-rate forces were simply not qualified to watch the rank of stars competition. That was why they applauded and cheered, trying their best to encourage the disciples of the various sects to spar. As for the sect leaders and chief disciples of the various sects, they remained silent for the time being, silently weighing the pros and cons in their hearts. Everyone knew that next year would be the triennial ranking of stars competition. At that time, the elite disciples of the various sects would compete on the star platform for the ranking of stars. If they could take advantage of this opportunity tonight to let the disciples of the various sects exchange pointers, they would be able to learn more about each other. This was a good thing for the disciples of the various sections. At least they could be prepared in advance. At the thought of this, the leaders and chief disciples of the various sects came up with a plan. The sect leaders of the Thousand Autumns sect, the True Martial sect, and the Wind Fire sect immediately agreed with the Tianjian sect leader's suggestion. Qiao Xian, Wang Tong, and the other 2 disciples also nodded in agreement. They also cast provocative looks at Ji Tianqing and the others. The sect leader of the Pill Tripod sect also nodded in agreement after hesitating for a moment. As a result, only the people of the Sky Pillar sect, the Heart Moon sect, and the Six Unity sect had yet to express their opinions on this matter. Coincidentally, the people from these 3 sects were seated right next to each other. This time, not only the people of the various sects, but all the guests in the hall all looked at Ji Tianqing and the others in unison. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and secretly transmitted his voice to Yun Yao, eldest senior sister. The Tianjian sect leader shouldn't be doing this on a whim. It's very likely that he's up to something. Yun Yao nodded slightly and replied using a secret method, yes, I know. However, the Tianjian sect leader has made this suggestion in front of everyone. I'm afraid that Elder Jun Yi and sect leader Yen won't be able to refuse. Sure enough, after Jun Yi and sect leader Yen discussed it for a while, they both nodded in agreement. Since the 7 sects had all agreed to this matter, Yun Yao naturally couldn't refuse. She didn't speak, so the Tianjian sect leader took it as her tacit agreement. He teased her with a faint smile, Yun Yao, you're already number 1 on the star list. You're recognized as the number 1 genius in the Tianshan region. You don't have to fight with these junior brothers and sisters, right? The sect leaders of the other sects chuckled and echoed the Tianjian sect leader's words, teasing Yun Yao. Yun Yao, you're already at the origin core stage, far surpassing the disciples of the other sections. If you go on stage, you'll be bullying others. I heard that there's a new genius in your sect who's also the personal disciple of your sect leader. His name seems to be Ji Tianqing. Let Ji Tianqing go on stage. It's a good opportunity for everyone to get to know each other. The people from the Thousand Autumns sect, the True Martial sect, and the Wind Fire sect all joined in the commotion. Shi Wenyu, Qiao Xian, Wang Tong, and the others also looked at Ji Tianqing with unfriendly expressions, revealing mocking expressions. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing naturally understood that the other party was targeting him. Yun Yao secretly asked him, Junior brother Tianqing, what do you think? If you don't want to fight, I'll stop this. Ji Tianqing shook his head, and the corners of his mouth curled into a playful sneer. Eldest senior sister, there's no need. Shi Wenyu, Qiao Xian, and the others who were defeated by me still haven't recovered from their injuries, yet they still dare to provoke me. I'd like to see what they're up to. Yun Yao thought for a moment, then nodded in agreement. She warned him in a serious tone, Junior brother Tianqing, be careful. Yen also looked up at Ji Tianqing and waved his little fist. Senior brother Tianqing, I believe that you can beat them all. Ji Tianqing patted his head and smiled confidently. Of course. Soon, the people from the Tianjian sect cleaned up the high platform and set up a defensive array, turning it into an arena. Shi Wenyu, Qiao Xian, and the others whispered to each other for a while, then came to a tacit agreement. Thus, Wang Tong of the true martial sect was the first to jump onto the high platform. He bowed to the guests in the hall and said loudly, "I am Wang Tong, the chief disciple of the true martial sect." After that, he looked down at Ji Tianqing and said in a cold and meaningful tone, "Ji Tianqing, junior brother Ji. I still can't forget what you said to me that day under the 7 Stars Pagoda. Today, in front of all the seniors and fellow Taoists, I'd like to ask junior brother Ji to teach me a thing or two. I'd like to see if junior brother Ji's strength is worthy of your arrogance." When the hundreds of martial artists in the hall heard Wang Tong's words, they suddenly smiled playfully and their hearts were filled with anticipation. Chapter 340. Under everyone's gaze, Ji Tianqing stood up. He looked at Wharton in the ring with an expressionless face and asked with an indifferent tone, "Wharton, where did you get the courage to challenge me in front of everyone? Could it be that you've got some divine weapon? Or do you have something else to rely on?" His voice wasn't loud, but it clearly spread throughout the entire lobby. All of a sudden, the hundreds of guests in the lobby all looked surprised. No one had thought that Ji Tianqing would be so arrogant to say such words in front of everyone. How much confidence did he need to have? The true martial sect master's face didn't look good. He looked at Ji Tianqing with a gloomy and cold gaze. In the ring, Wharton, who brought shame upon himself, was also full of shame and indignation. He angrily shouted, "Ji Tianqing. You're really as arrogant as always." Ji Tianqing walked toward the ring like the wind and said with an indifferent expression, "I'm just stating the facts. How am I arrogant?" As his voice faded, he leaped 10 meters away and jumped into the ring. Just as he stood still, Wharton keenly seized the opportunity and shot toward him like an arrow leaving the bow. He punched out 2 dazzling fist lights toward his face and chest. Whoosh! Wharton was well aware of Ji Tianqing's strength, so he used all his strength right from the start. His speed was extremely fast, leaving several afterimages behind him. Cloudfrost Tyrant Fist. Wharton roared angrily. The fist lights that burst out from his fists turned into an ice blue color, releasing a bone-chilling aura that shrouded the ring with a radius of 20 meters. In an instant, the entire ring was covered with a layer of ice blue color, and the temperature dropped to the extreme. The fist lights that were as big as a basin also smashed toward Ji Tianqing, less than half a meter away from him. The hundreds of guests in the hall all held their breaths as they stared intently at the scene. But Ji Tianqing's expression didn't change. He was still calm and composed as if he had expected Wharton to do so. He raised his left hand that was as red as magma. The scarlet true fire in his palm condensed into a giant flaming palm and slammed toward Wharton. Boom! The flaming palms collided with the 2 frosty fists in an instant, causing a loud, dull sound to ring out. At that moment, a violent and blazing flame burst forth, dispersing the cold air on the arena. The 2 icy fists were shattered on the spot. They turned into wisps of water vapor and were evaporated by the giant flaming palm. Wang Tong was also hit head-on by the giant flaming palm. He flew back in a sorry state and fell on the stage 10 meters away. By the time he got up, the white robe in front of his chest had already been charred black, leaving behind a huge black palm print. His face became very ugly, and his eyes were filled with shame and anger. The hundreds of guests in the hall suddenly revealed shocked expressions and exclaimed in surprise. "Wow! This Ji Tianqing's strength is actually so strong." Wang Tong, a LV8 Tongxian stage martial artist, couldn't even withstand a single palm strike from him. Both of them are obviously at Tongxian stage LV8, and Wang Tong made the first move. How did this happen? Looks like Ji Tianqing does have the right to be arrogant. Wang Tong heard the crowd's discussion and became even more furious. He shouted angrily and pounced on Ji Tianqing again. Snowy Frost City. Wang Tong burst forth with all the power he had accumulated in his lifetime, displaying his trump card. His palms emitted an overwhelming white light, releasing a bone-chilling cold current that enveloped the surrounding 20 meters. Instantly, the entire arena was covered with a thick layer of frost, and dense white snowflakes appeared in the air. He waved his palms as fast as lightning, striking out 64 frosty palm shadows that descended from the sky toward Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing's figure was immediately engulfed by the overwhelming cold palm shadows and the fluttering snowflakes. The temperature in the hall seemed to have dropped to the freezing point. Countless people subconsciously shrank their necks. Snow in the hot summer of June. Such a rare sight could only be seen here. Countless guests widened their eyes and stared at the arena, anticipating the result. In the next moment, among the dozens of frosty palm shadows, a huge flaming palm suddenly blasted out. Bang! With a muffled sound, the dozens of frosty palm shadows were shattered into shards of frosty light and scattered in all directions. The flaming palm passed through the frosty light and hit Wang Tong, sending him flying again. With a bang, he crashed into the defensive array. When Wang Tong struggled to get up, blood gushed out of his mouth. He held his charred chest with both hands, and black smoke rose from his body. The same scene played out again, but Ji Tianqing still used the same flaming palm, the same move. Simple, violent, and domineering. He crushed Wang Tong in a violent and invincible manner, severely injuring him with just 2 palms. The hundreds of people in the hall were stunned at the scene. The martial artists from the second and third-rate forces felt that their horizons had been broadened. They were both shocked and excited. The eyes of the sect masters were a little gloomy. Obviously, they had expected that things were not going well. The Sky Pillar sect had a super-talented Yun Yao, which had already multiplied the pressure of the other sects and made them jealous. Now, Ji Tianqing had appeared, who was as monstrous as Yun Yao and could completely crush opponents of the same level. Was there still justice in this? The sect masters were all thinking in their hearts. 10 or 20 years later, when Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao grew up, wouldn't the Sky Pillar sect be invincible? Wang Tong staggered to his feet and glared at Ji Tianqing. He shouted coldly, "Ji Tianqing. You win. I admit defeat." After saying that, he ignored the discussions and chuckles of the people in the hall and quickly walked down the arena, returning to the true martial sect master's side to heal his injuries. Ji Tianqing didn't expect that Wang Tong would be able to endure such great humiliation and admit defeat so straightforwardly. He thought to himself, before Wang Tong went up the arena, he had discussed something with Shi Wenyu, Qiao Xian, and the others. He endured the humiliation and admitted defeat in public. Could it be that there's a conspiracy? At this moment, Shi Wenyu stood up with a swoosh and walked towards the arena. Ji Tianqing. This is the Tianjian sect, and tonight is my master's birthday. How can I allow you to be presumptuous here? Hearing this angry shout, Ji Tianqing raised his head and looked at him. He couldn't help but frown. Shi Wenyu, haven't I taught you a lesson before? He could see that Shi Wenyu's complexion was not good. It was obvious that his injuries had not recovered, and his strength was a little weak. He couldn't understand. Shi Wenyu had been trampled by him once. Where did he get the courage to challenge him in public? Wasn't Shi Wenyu afraid of being defeated in public and ridiculed by all the guests? Shi Wenyu jumped onto the arena and shouted sternly, "Ji Tianqing. No matter how strong and ruthless you are, I must fight you tonight." Ji Tianqing frowned again. He vaguely felt that Shi Wenyu's words had a deeper meaning. He looked at Shi Wenyu contemptuously and sneered, "You're just a defeated opponent. You haven't even recovered from your injuries. What right do you have to challenge me?" Shi Wenyu was immediately filled with anger. He rushed toward him as fast as the wind, waving his palms to create a sky full of flames. Chapter 341. More than 40 flaming palm shadows densely covered a radius of 10 meters. Ji Tianqing's figure was immediately obscured by the flames that filled the sky. At the critical moment, he waved his palms without changing his expression and struck out more than 30 palm shadows. On the surface, it looked like he was using the same flaming palm technique as Shi Wenyu. But in reality, his skills were much deeper than Shi Wenyu's. His true red flame fire was also more powerful than Shi Wenyu's true essence flames. In a series of muffled sounds, the flaming palm shadows from both sides collided fiercely and exploded at the same time. Ji Tianqing easily resolved Shi Wenyu's attack. After the flames in the sky dissipated, he approached Shi Wenyu unscathed. Shi Wenyu. Whether it was before, now, or in the future, you are no match for me. You will lose without a doubt. He shouted in a cold tone. His figure turned into a golden stream of light and rushed toward Shi Wenyu as fast as lightning. When the hundreds of guests in the hall heard Ji Tianqing's words, their faces were filled with shock. Only then did everyone know that he had already fought with Shi Wenyu and that Shi Wenyu had been injured by him. Understanding this, everyone was shocked and all kinds of thoughts emerged in their minds. It's said that Shi Wenyu is an elite genius second only to Yun Yao. He will definitely take second place on the star list next year. Ji Tianqing has already defeated Shi Wenyu. Doesn't that mean he is second on the star list? This is unbelievable. The first and second geniuses of the Tianshan region are both disciples of the Sky Pillar sect? This is going to be a good show. Shi Wenyu will lose without a doubt. The Tianjian sect is going to be humiliated. The Tianjian sect master proposed to let the disciples of the various sects exchange pointers, but the Tianjian sect was defeated. How will this end later? The hundreds of guests had mixed feelings. They stared at the arena expectantly, waiting for a good show to unfold. Shi Wenyu was filled with grief and indignation. His face was as gloomy as ice, but he clenched his teeth and didn't say a word. He used all of his strength to display his palm technique, releasing the power of his true essence to the limit, and directly clashed with Ji Tianqing. The two of them continuously shot out dozens of flaming palms condensed from true essence. In the blink of an eye, they had collided dozens of times, causing a series of muffled explosions. Bang 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 bang. In that instant, the hundreds of flaming palm shadows collapsed and exploded, turning into flame fragments that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, splashing in all directions. The entire arena had turned into a world of flames, filled with raging flames. Finally, Shi Wenyu's attack was completely defeated. His attack was full of flaws and holes. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianqing raised his hand and slapped his chest. Boom! With a muffled sound, Shi Wenyu was sent flying on the spot. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood as he was sent flying backwards, crashing heavily into the protective shield of the defensive formation. Then, he fell to the ground and rolled twice before coming to a stop. He lay still on the ground. His eyes were closed tightly while blood still flowed from his mouth and nose. The true essence aura and vitality in his entire body had already weakened rapidly, and he became deathly silent. Seeing this scene, countless guests were stunned. Many people were full of confusion as they stared at Shi Wenyu lying on the ground, not understanding what had happened. A moment later, someone suddenly stood up from his seat and screamed in horror. Someone's dead. Shi Wenyu's dead. The person who screamed was Qiao Xian. Wang Tong and Song Zhong beside him came back to their senses and shouted. Someone's dead. Ji Tianqing killed Shi Wenyu. Ji Tianqing actually committed murder in front of everyone. Catch him. Suddenly, the entire hall was in an uproar. Hundreds of guests were shocked, their eyes full of horror. Countless people stood up, and their gazes gathered on Shi Wenyu in unison. Ji Tianqing was also stunned. He frowned as he looked at Shi Wenyu lying on the ground, his heart filled with confusion. What's going on? What the hell is Shi Wenyu doing? Pretending to be dead? I clearly only used 70% of my strength. With his strength, he would at most be injured by me. How could he be killed? Thinking of this, he subconsciously walked to Shi Wenyu's side and stretched out 2 fingers to check Shi Wenyu's breath. There was no breath. Ji Tianqing's expression changed, and he checked Shi Wenyu's pulse and heartbeat. The result was still no sound. Shi Wenyu's body had no breath or heartbeat at all. He had become a lifeless corpse. Ji Tianqing was stunned. His eyes became extremely serious, and many thoughts flashed through his mind. He's really dead? He was killed by me so easily. This is impossible. There must be something wrong. Everyone in the hall stood up, and their expressions became grave and solemn. Everyone knew that Ji Tianqing had gotten into big trouble. He had killed the Tianjian sect's favorite disciple, Shi Wenyu, in front of all the guests at the Tianjian sect's birthday banquet. This was absolutely a monstrous disaster, and it was also an extreme provocation and humiliation to the Tianjian sect. The Tianjian sect master, who was sitting in the main seat, had been calmly watching the fight with a wine cup in his hand. Suddenly, such an accident happened, and he was stunned on the spot. The wine cup in his hand fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. In the next moment, the Tianjian sect master came to his senses and stood up with a swish. He stared coldly at Ji Tianqing, his face livid. Without needing him to give the order, Immortal Tianji jumped into the arena. He bent down to check Shi Wenyu's breath, and immediately reported to the Tianjian sect master in a serious tone, "Sect master, Wenyu is dead." Immortal Tianji's words were the final conclusion. The hundreds of guests' faces changed dramatically, and they all cried out in alarm. The Tianjian sect master seemed to be unable to bear this blow. His body swayed a few times, and his face was as pale as paper. He took a deep breath, and then shouted angrily, "Guards! Take down that madman Ji Tianqing." Hearing the order, the 4 purple-robed elders of the Sky Sword sect immediately jumped onto the stage at lightning speed and surrounded Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing finally realized that there was something wrong with this matter. Seeing the 4 elders approaching with murderous intent, he immediately shouted in a low voice, "Wait a minute. There's something fishy about this matter. There's definitely something wrong. When I fought with Shi Wenyu, it wasn't a fight to the death. I only used 70% of my strength. With Shi Wenyu's strength, there's no way he could have been killed by my palm." Many people understood this point, and they felt that this matter was very strange. However, the Tianjian sect master was as furious as a mad lion. He roared with his beard flying in the air, "Ji Tianqing, the facts are in front of us. Everyone saw you commit murder with their own eyes. Do you still want to deny it? My disciple, Shi Wenyu, has been killed by you. His body is right in front of you. No matter how you try to deny it, you can't confuse right and wrong." Chapter 342. Even though Ji Tianqing realized that Shi Wenyu's death was extremely fishy, but Shi Wenyu's corpse was on the arena, and the hundreds of guests in the hall and members of the various sects had witnessed Shi Wenyu being beaten to death by him with their own eyes. The facts were all present, and Ji Tianqing was unable to defend himself. The 4 Tianjian sect elders were covered in killing intent as they attacked with savage expressions. They condensed enormous palms, sword lights, and fist lights with boundless true essence and blasted down towards Ji Tianqing, wanting to kill or capture him on the spot. The 4 of them were all around the 7th level of the origin core stage, and the true essence they emitted was dazzling and resplendent, and its might was incomparably shocking. The arena with a circumference of 20 meters was actually filled with violent and raging force, and it became incomparably chaotic. Ji Tianqing was besieged by the 4 elders, and it was as if he was being minced by a myriad of true essence light blades. He instantly fell into a life and death situation and was about to lose his life in an instant. No matter how strong his strength was or how high his natural talent in the martial Tao was, it was all useless at this moment. The strength of the 4 elders far surpassed him by many times, and he utterly had no room to dodge or resist. At the moment of life and death, Ji Tianqing withdrew a silver ball from his spatial ring. This dark silver ball was the treasure Chu Tiansheng gave him when he borrowed the jade soul coffin from Chu Tiansheng, and it could save his life at a critical moment. Ji Tianqing had never used it in the 7-star pagoda, and it finally came in handy at this moment. He held the silver ball in his right hand and poured his boundless and vast true essence into it. The silver ball instantly lit up with a dazzling and resplendent silver light, and it instantly expanded and transformed into a ball of dark silver light that enveloped his entire body. Whoosh! In only an instant, a set of dark silver armor appeared on Ji Tianqing's body out of thin air. This set of armor was extremely valiant and domineering, and it was suffused with a silver light that was like the radiance of stars and emitted a mysterious and vast aura. The armor covered him from head to toe, and there was a helmet, arm guards, gloves, and a pair of combat boots. Not only was this set of armor able to protect him in all aspects, every part of his body was concealed with weapons. There were 3 sharp blades hidden in the helmet, and there were also sharp knives hidden in the arm guard. There were even spikes at the joints of the gloves. Even the knees of the armor and the soles of the combat boots had several sharp blades hidden in them. All in all, after Ji Tianqing put on the armor, not only was he fully protected, he was also fully armed, with weapons all over his body. In the next instant, the combined attacks of the 4 elders hit Ji Tianqing with a bang bang bang. His body swayed and trembled as silver light flickered all over his body. The arena with a radius of 20 meters was immediately filled with multicolored true essence light, becoming extremely chaotic. Most people were certain that the Tongxian realm Ji Tianqing would not be able to withstand the combined attack of 4 primal core adepts. Even if he was protected by armor and wasn't killed on the spot, he would still be severely injured. However, to everyone's surprise, Ji Tianqing was completely unscathed. He was still standing upright in the ring. The silver armor he was wearing had actually blocked the attacks of the 4 elders. This scene shocked the hundreds of guests. The Tianjian sect leader's expression also changed. Surprise flashed across his eyes as he exclaimed in disbelief, "It's actually the starry armor? That bastard Chu Tianqing actually gave the starry armor to Ji Tianqing? How is this possible?" Others might not recognize the armor, but he had fought with Chu Tianqing several times and naturally recognized the dark silver armor. It was one of the top treasures of the Sky Pillar sect, the starry armor. The starry armor was a heaven origin grade treasure. Only a heaven origin grade adept could refine it and break through it. It was almost impossible for warriors below the heaven origin grade to break through the defense of the starry armor. With the starry armor, Ji Tianqing was in an invincible position. Only a heaven origin grade adept could break through the defense of the starry armor. All along, the starry armor had been an important treasure that Chu Tianqing always carried with him. He would never show it to others easily. The Tianjian sect leader had never imagined that Chu Tianqing would give such a rare treasure like the starry armor to Ji Tianqing. What did this mean? Could it be that in Chu Tianqing's eyes, Ji Tianqing's safety was incomparably important? Was it the same as being the successor of the sect master? At this moment, not only was the Tianjian sect leader shocked, but the 4 elders in the arena were also stunned. The 4 of them stared at the starry armor that Ji Tianqing was wearing. Their faces were filled with anger and killing intent as they shouted angrily. "Little bastard! He actually has a treasure armor protecting him. What kind of armor is this? It can actually withstand the joint attack of the 4 of us? Who cares what kind of armor it is? Quickly take down Ji Tianqing. Kill him. Avenge Wenyu." After saying that, the 4 elders raised their palms and fists, ready to attack Ji Tianqing. At this moment, an angry shout was heard. "The Tianjian sect is so unreasonable. Do you want to start a war with my Sky Pillar sect?" As the cold voice was heard, a white-clothed figure jumped onto the arena and stood in front of Ji Tianqing. This person was precisely Yunyao, and she held a treasured sword that emitted piercingly cold lights and was like a pool of autumn water. She was dressed in a long white dress and stood with a cold expression on her face as she held the sword. Even though she was facing 4 Tianjian sect elders alone, she didn't shrink back. Her temperament was like a snow lotus at the top of the mountain, holy and arrogant. Countless people in the lobby were impressed by Yunyao's peerless elegance, and many young men felt a strong admiration for her. Immediately after, another clear angry shout rang out. "You despicable villains want to frame my senior brother Tianqing? You'll have to get through me first." Following the angry roar, a little boy in a white robe with a head full of red hair turned into a fiery shadow and rushed onto the arena. He stood beside Ji Tianqing, full of anger. He held a purple sword that was as tall as him in both hands and glared at the 4 Tianjin sect elders. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the arena became extremely tense, surging with terrifying killing intent. Taking advantage of this opportunity, a deacon of the Tianjin sect hurriedly stepped onto the arena and took Shi Wenyu's body away. Ji Tianqing, Yin Yao, and Yen faced the 4 elders fearlessly. Their bodies were full of fighting spirit. Seeing this scene, many people from the second and third-rate forces, as well as the sect leaders and disciples of other sects, were secretly impressed. The Sky Pillar sect was indeed the #1 sect in the Tianshan region. Even the 3 disciples in the sect had courage and pride that ordinary people couldn't compare with. Seeing this scene, the Tianjin sect leader sneered proudly. He thought to himself, the 3 of you are joining forces to fight back. That's exactly what I want. None of you can leave. He pretended to be sad and angry and shouted, Ji Tianqing, today you must pay with your blood. Yin Yao, get out of my way. If you insist on resisting, don't blame me for being impolite. Yin Yao and Yen were bound to advance and retreat with Ji Tianqing. How could they leave Ji Tianqing alone? Chapter 343. Yin Yao and Yen didn't even take half a step back. The Tianjin sect master had long expected such a result, and he was happy to see it. His face was full of anger as he said to the guests in a loud voice, fellow Taoists, you all saw it. The Sky Pillar sect is so overbearing and unreasonable. Even their disciples are cruel and heartless bastards who willfully slaughter innocent people. Ji Tianqing killed my disciple, Shi Wenyu, in front of everyone. The 3 of them actually resisted to the end and started a massacre at my birthday banquet. My Tianjin sect will never submit to such a cruel and vicious act. Even if I have to break off relations with the Sky Pillar sect, I will seek justice for my dead disciple. The Tianjin sect master's words were sorrowful and impassioned, immediately arousing the passion and resonance of many guests. In particular, the people from the Thousand Autumns sect, the True Martial sect, and the Wind and Fire sect shouted for Ji Tianqing to pay with his life and loudly complained about the Sky Pillar sect's overbearing and evil deeds. Many cultivators were stirred up, and their emotions soared as they supported the Tianjin sect master to seek justice for Shi Wenyu. After all, the Sky Pillar sect had dominated the Tianshan region for thousands of years, and many forces had long been dissatisfied and envious. However, these forces were weak and didn't dare to show their dissatisfaction with the Sky Pillar sect. Now that such a thing had happened, the Tianjin sect master stood up and shouted, and the others naturally responded. The hall suddenly became noisy, bursting with shouts one after another. Among the hundreds of guests, more than half of them supported the Tianjin sect. Although the remaining cultivators didn't open their mouths to agree with the Tianjin sect master's words, they also wouldn't fight for justice for the Sky Pillar sect. These people all maintained a neutral attitude and coldly watched the situation develop. This situation was exactly what the Tianjin sect master had planned. He made a prompt decision and roared, giving the order. Guards! Take down the 3 arrogant disciples of the Sky Pillar sect. If anyone resists, kill them without mercy. As soon as his voice fell, more than 30 black-armored guards immediately appeared outside the hall. The guards all held treasured swords that flickered with cold light as they rushed into the hall with murderous intent and charged towards Ji Tianqing's group of 3 on the stage. These black-armored guards all had strength above the 7th level of the Profound Comprehension stage. Almost half of the people amongst them were Heavenly Sword sect deacons in disguise, and all of them possessed a strength at the 2nd or 3rd level of the Origin Core stage. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing's eyes surged with a cold light as he sneered in his heart. In the next moment, the 4 elders waved their hands and sent out palm shadows that filled the sky, attacking without any explanation. Moonlight essence. Yin Yao shouted coldly and used all of her strength. She waved her cold moon sword and slashed out a huge crescent-shaped sword light towards the 4 elders. That crescent-shaped sword light was over 10 meters long and 2 meters wide, and it emitted a dazzling and resplendent cold light. Instantly, the spacious and empty hall was illuminated to the point it was as bright as snow, revealing every detail. Yen Er also swung his treasured saber with all his strength, slashing out an enormous violet flame saber light that slashed towards one of the elders. Skycore Violet Flame Slash. Even though he only had a strength at the 9th level of the Profound Comprehension stage, the ultimate move he executed when he exploded out with his full potential had a might comparable to the attack of a 1st or 2nd level Origin Core stage expert. Ji Tianqing urged the strength of the sword embryo to release an enormous crimson flame sword light that blasted towards the 4 elders. Crimson Dragon Flash. The crimson flames that rose from the 6-meter-long flaming sword light caused the sword light to transform into a flaming divine dragon, and its might increased by a few times. The ultimate moves executed by the 3 of them collided with the attacks of the 4 elders, instantly exploding out with loud bangs that shook the heavens. The deafening loud bangs reverberated endlessly in the hall, shaking the ground to the point it trembled, and the entire palace started shaking. Numerous saber lights and sword lights collapsed and exploded, bursting out with destructive shock waves that ceaselessly bombarded the defensive formation of the arena. In the blink of an eye, the defensive formation that enveloped the arena was blasted into pieces, and the earthen yellow shield fell apart and transformed into fragments that covered the ground. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's group of 3 actually blocked the joint attack of the 4 elders, and neither side gained the upper hand. But at this moment, more than 30 black armored guards arrived. Swoosh! 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 The numerous guards charged up the arena and swung their swords to attack from all directions, slashing out sword lights that covered the sky and covered the earth, drowning the figures of Ji Tianqing's group of 3. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing had no choice but to brandish his saber and sword to resist. Yun Yao's left index and middle fingers were pressed together, forming a mysterious finger technique, while her right hand held the cold moon sword, spraying out hundreds of cold sword lights. The densely packed huge sword beams were like raging waves that swept towards the surrounding black armored guards. Yen Er also brandished the purple flame saber with all her strength, slashing out red sun purple flame that filled the sky, turning half of the arena into a sea of fire. As for Ji Tianqing, his eyes were surging with murderous intent. He pushed his true essence to the limit, bursting out all his potential. Soaring dragon from the 9th heaven. He shouted in a low voice, suddenly pulling out the black dragon sword and slashing at the several black armored guards behind him. The moment the black dragon sword was unsheathed, it let out a dragon roar that shook the 9 heavens, and a huge dazzling cold light lit up. Roar! The sword that seemed to split the heaven and earth instantly sent 4 black armored guards flying, shattering their armors and covering them with blood. At the same time, Ji Tianqing took out a talisman from his interspatial ring. After injecting majestic true essence into it, he threw it to the black armored guards on his left. Mountain-splitting incantation. Chu Tiansheng had given him 2 talismans, and this mountain-splitting incantation was one of them. After detonating, it could release the power to shatter mountains and rivers. Boom! The mountain-splitting incantation flew to the black armored guards and was immediately detonated, turning into a huge golden flame. In the loud noise, 5 black armored guards were hit by the golden flame. They were covered with blood on the spot and flew back in a sorry state. After landing on the ground, they were seriously injured and passed out. The spacious lobby was immediately plunged into chaos and danger. The air was filled with the smell of blood, and the violent and raging shock waves spread out, crushing the tables and chairs in the lobby, making the floor a mess as if it had been hit by a typhoon. Many guests who were closer to the arena were scared and retreated to the corner in panic. In the blink of an eye, Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, and Yen had injured more than a dozen black armored guards and killed 4 of them on the spot. A gap was torn in the encirclement of the black armored guards. Ji Tianqing and the other 2 didn't want to continue fighting. They immediately rushed out of the arena through the gap and fled out of the lobby as fast as lightning. The Tianjian sect master thought that he had arranged 4 elders, more than a dozen deacons, and many guards in advance, so they would definitely be able to kill Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao on the spot. However, he didn't expect that Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's combat strength would be so powerful. Seeing that the three of them were about to escape from the lobby, he suddenly became furious and let out a roar like a wild lion. Thieves from the Sky Pillar sect! You killed my Tianjian sect's people and still want to escape? Give me your life! The Tianjian sect master roared and rushed out in a flash. Chapter 344. In the Tianshan region, warriors at the Heavenly Origin realm were the strongest. In the entire Tianshan territory, there were only 10 known Heaven Origin stage warriors. Every Heaven Origin stage warrior was a grandmaster who could establish a sect. They could help a sect survive for hundreds of years and occupy a place in the ancient realm of the stars. No one would have thought that the Tianjian sect master, a Heaven Origin stage warrior, would ignore his status and attack the younger generation. He did not care about the dignity and face of a strong warrior. Swoosh! The Tianjian sect master took 6 steps in the blink of an eye and caught up with Ji Tianqing and the other 2. Go to hell! He roared with murderous intent and reached out to grab Yan, and Ji Tianqing. A 5-colored brilliance gushed out of his palms. He used the 5 elements' genuine vitality to condense 2 giant palms and cover the 2 figures. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing activated the power of the star armor. Silver starlight burst out from his feet and doubled his speed. Swoosh! He narrowly escaped the capture of the Heavenly Sword sect master and brushed past the 5-colored giant palm, dodging a calamity. Yan was at the back and had no time to dodge. Seeing the 5-colored giant palms descending from the sky, he could only desperately wave the purple flame saber and slash out an earth-shattering saber radiance. Bang! The saber radiance hit the 5-colored giant palms and exploded with a dull sound. However, the Tianjian sect master's giant palms did not move at all and were not damaged at all. With a clench of his hand, he caught the purple flaming blade and crushed it into pieces. Before Yan could react, his other hand descended from the sky and slapped Yan to the ground with a bang. The ground paved with stone slabs was immediately smashed into a large crater, and spiderweb-like cracks appeared on it. Yan was lying in the pit covered in dust. Blood was seeping out of several places on his body and his mouth and nose. Obviously, he could not withstand the attack of the Tianjian sect master and was seriously injured on the spot. Little bastard! Let's see where you can run to. The Tianjian sect master grinned hideously. Once again, he stretched out his huge left hand, which was condensed by the light of true essence. He pulled Yan out of the pit and held him tightly in his palm. Yan struggled desperately, but his injuries were too serious. His spirit was weak and weary, and he was about to pass out. When Ji Tianqing saw Yan being captured, his expression changed drastically. His eyes were filled with rage. Let Yan go. Heavenly Sword sect master, you damned old bastard. With a furious roar, he turned around and rushed toward the Tianjian sect master with the black dragon sword in his hand, intending to rescue Yan But just as he turned around, his arm was grabbed by a slender hand. He turned his head and saw Yun Yao looking at him with a solemn expression. She shook her head and said to him through voice transmission, Tianqing, don't be impulsive. Now is not the time to act on impulse. This is the Tianjian sect's conspiracy. The Tianjian sect master wants to kill us. We must leave this place immediately. Otherwise, all 3 of us will die here. The Heavenly Sword sect master meticulously devised this scheme to kill us. Even if master were to avenge us, it would be useless. How could Ji Tianqing not understand this? But when he saw Yan being seriously injured and captured by the Tianjian sect master, how could he leave Yan alone? Senior sister, I understand what you said. But what about Yan We can't leave him behind. Yun Yao pursed her lips and said in a low but firm tone, Tianqing, you have to believe me. We must leave immediately. Yen is the crown prince of the Fire Clan. No matter how arrogant the Tianjian sect master is, he will never dare to kill Yen unless he wants to be the enemy of the entire Fire Clan. Although the population of the Fire Clan was small, all of them were gifted. There were many masters in the clan. If the Tianjian sect master killed the crown prince of the Fire Clan, it would be a declaration of war against the entire Fire Clan. No matter how powerful the Tianjian sect was, it couldn't bear the revenge and anger of the Fire Clan. It would definitely be destroyed. Ji Tianqing was weighing the pros and cons in his heart. He still didn't want to give up the hope of rescuing Yen At this time, Yen struggled to support his seriously injured body and shouted to him and Yun Yao in a hoarse voice, "Senior sister, senior brother Tianqing. Run. Don't worry about me. Go and report to master." He seemed to have exhausted all his strength. After shouting these two words, he couldn't hold on any longer. He closed his eyes and fainted. The Tianjian sect master threw Yen to an elder and rushed to Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao with a ferocious face. He shouted angrily, "Bastards, you want to run away in front of me? Wishful thinking." He raised his right palm again, and an overwhelming five-colored brilliance burst out from his palm and blasted toward Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing subconsciously raised his left arm and accumulated all his power in his left hand. Suddenly, his entire left arm turned red like magma, and the dark purple true fire of red flame surged in his palm. Burning sky palm. Ji Tianqing gritted his teeth and roared. He unleashed all his potential and used his strongest killing move. Boom! An incomparably huge flaming palm appeared. A monstrous fire gushed out, illuminating the entire hall red. The broken pieces of the tables and chairs scattered on the ground were burned into charcoal. The flaming palm carried a destructive impact and blasted the giant palm of the Tianjian sect master head-on, drowning his figure. A scene that shocked everyone to the point of suffocation appeared. The five-colored brilliance of the Tianjian sect master was smashed into pieces by the flaming palm. Even the Tianjian sect master was hit by the flaming palm and flew backward in a sorry state. Bang! The Tianjian sect master flew backward 100 meters and slammed into the wall of the palace. The flaming palm blasted a hole with a radius of more than 10 meters in the hard wall made of huge stones. Dense cracks appeared on the wall, and then, with a series of cracking sounds, the wall completely collapsed. The flaming palm wrapped around the Tianjian sect master and blasted through the wall of the hall. It flew another 100 meters and blasted through a palace before finally dissipating. The palace shook violently for a while and then collapsed with a rumble. It turned into a pile of rubble and buried the Tianjian sect master. Everyone was dumbfounded. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, no one would have believed that Ji Tianqing, who was only at the Tongxian realm, could use such a destructive palm technique. The Tianjian sect master, who was at the Tianyuan realm, was sent flying by a Tongxian realm martial artist. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, no one would have believed it. This was a miracle. No, this was a miracle. An unprecedented miracle. When everyone came to their senses, they immediately burst into deafening screams. At this moment, the entire northern wall of the hall collapsed. The entire hall shook violently and began to collapse. The enormous roof cracked quickly, and large pieces of broken bricks fell down from the roof, landing in the hall along with a series of loud thuds. Many of the guests immediately dispersed in an uproar, scrambling to escape from the hall. Chapter 345. Ji Tianqing had used the burning sky palm for the first time in the world of lava in the hidden fog mountains. He had destroyed a volcano with one blow. The burial of heaven had reminded him that although the burning sky palm had the power to destroy the world, it would also consume his true red flame fire. He could only use the burning sky palm 3 times in a short period of time. His true red flame fire would be exhausted and he would have to cultivate for a long time to recover. It was the second time Ji Tianqing had used the burning sky palm. Although he had created a miracle and sent the Tianjian sect master flying with one blow, he had consumed too much true red flame fire. However, he had consumed too much of his scarlet flame true fire. At most, he could use it one more time before his scarlet flame true fire ran out. However, he did not expect to kill or injure the Tianjian sect master with the burning sky palm. He would be satisfied if he could force him to retreat. Swoosh! Swoosh! Yunyao pulled him out of the hall and stepped into the dark night. As soon as they escaped from the hall, they saw a large number of experts lying in ambush in the square outside the hall. More than 20 white-robed guards, as well as 5 black-robed deacons, all of them holding shining swords, rushed over with murderous intent. Kill them. The sect master has ordered us not to let them leave alive. Kill them. Hearing the shouts of the guards, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao both frowned and looked serious. In the hall behind them, several elders, deacons, and black-armored guards were chasing after them with murderous intent. There was an ambush in front of them and pursuers behind them. They were in a dilemma. What was worse was that the Tianjian sect master had climbed out of the ruins of the palace. After all, he was an expert in the sky origin stage. Even if he was careless and was sent flying by Ji Tianqing's burning sky palm, he had no defense. However, he possessed an incomparably valiant defensive technique that neutralized the might of the burning sky palm, so he did not suffer any injuries. Ji Tianqing's attack had provoked his anger and ferocity. He was so ashamed and angry that he almost went berserk. Ji Tianqing! I will skin you alive and pull out your tendons. The Tianjian sect master roared angrily and turned into a ball of dark red fire. He rushed out of the brick ruins, passed through the crumbling lobby, and pounced toward Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. The situation was extremely critical. If Ji Tianqing and Yunyao did not think of a way to escape, they would be besieged by many experts and experts. At that time, it would be impossible for him to escape even if he had wings. He would definitely die. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing immediately took out the second talisman Chu Tiansheng had given him from his spatial ring. Boundless true essence gushed out of his palm and poured into the charm as he shouted, "Void escape charm." The talisman instantly burned into black ash and lit up with a dazzling white light, condensing into an oval-shaped light gate. The moment the white light door was formed, Ji Tianqing pulled Yunyao into the light door. Shwa! With a flash of white light, the two of them disappeared into thin air. The oval-shaped white light door immediately collapsed and dissipated, turning into white light spots that scattered in the night sky. In the next moment, the numerous guards and deacons waved their swords and slashed out sword lights that filled the sky. With a swish 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 sound, a huge deep pit was blasted out on the ground. The loud noise was deafening. Dust flew everywhere, and the entrance of the lobby was in chaos. When the smoke and dust dissipated, the Tianjian sect master and several elders finally arrived at the entrance. Under the eaves of the corridor outside the door, the ground was full of cracks, leaving only a huge deep pit. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao were nowhere to be seen. Seeing this scene, the Tianjian sect master was so angry that his eyes turned red. He roared furiously, "Chase after them. Even if we have to chase them to the ends of the earth, we must kill them." Everyone felt his monstrous anger and kept quiet out of fear, not daring to be negligent. Several deacons led a large number of black-armored guards and hurried into the dark night sky to chase after Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. Originally, the Tianjian sect master's plan was perfect, and the process was very smooth. If there were no accidents, he would have killed Ji Tianqing and Yunyao by now. But he never expected that the final result would be like this. 2 of the Tianjian sect's palaces were destroyed, and more than a dozen guards and deacons were killed or injured. However, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao escaped successfully. How could the heavenly sword sect master not be enraged? At the same time, a purple-robed elder beside him secretly transmitted a message to him, "Sect master, things have come to this. Please calm down. The people of the various sects are still here. What do you think we should do?" The Tianjian sect master took several deep breaths before he could barely suppress his anger. He turned his head and looked at the collapsing lobby. He saw hundreds of guests with complicated expressions on their faces. They were still scrambling to get out of the building. His face was cold, and his tone was indifferent as he said, "Fellow Taoists, I am very angry and distressed that such a thing happened at my birthday banquet tonight. I believe that everyone has witnessed the arrogance, despotism, and brutality of the Sky Pillar sect. I still have things to deal with, so I won't entertain you. I hope that everyone will be magnanimous enough to forgive me. Take care." The Tianjian sect master spoke politely, but what he actually meant was that he was going to see the guests out. The guests were very tactful. They quickly left the lobby, casually said goodbye, and went down the mountain under the cover of the night. The Heavenly Sword sect master couldn't be bothered to exchange pleasantries with the various guests. He directly ignored everyone and quickly left with a few elders. After a while, everyone entered the conference hall. An elder in a purple robe carried the unconscious Yan and asked the Tianjian sect master, "Sect master, how should we deal with this kid? Do you want to kill him?" The Tianjian sect master glanced at the elder and shouted in a deep voice, "Lock him up in the secret room and watch over him strictly. Don't let him escape, and don't let him die. This kid is the crown prince of the Fire Clan. If he dies in our Tianjian sect, all of you will be buried with him." The elder immediately nodded to show that he understood. He turned around and left the conference hall with Yan. The Tianjian sect master ordered the other elders, "You all immediately take people and search the surrounding area. You must find Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. Once you find them, kill them on the spot." The elders immediately cupped their hands and accepted the order. They quickly left the conference hall to carry out the order. After the elders left, the Tianjian sect master hurriedly took Daoist Tianji out of the conference hall and entered a secret room full of spiritual qi. There were two people in the dimly lit secret room. One of them was Shi Wenyu, who was lying on the cold jade ice bed. He was motionless and breathless. The other person was foreign guest Huangfu. After the Tianjian sect master took Daoist Tianji into the secret room, he couldn't wait to order, "Daoist Tianji, quickly use the antidote to wake Wenyu up so as not to delay his recovery." Daoist Tianji nodded and pretended to perform a secret technique. He used his fingers to hit several acupoints on Shi Wenyu's body. Then, he took out a pill from his interspatial ring and stuffed it into Shi Wenyu's mouth. Everyone waited patiently for a while, but Shi Wenyu still didn't move and didn't respond at all. Seeing this scene, the Tianjian sect master frowned in confusion. He walked to Shi Wenyu's side and reached out to touch Shi Wenyu's forehead. He felt a chill without any warmth. He turned to look at Daoist Tianji and asked in a deep voice, "Daoist Tianji, what's going on? Why hasn't Wenyu woken up yet?" Daoist Tianji hurriedly stepped forward and carefully checked Shi Wenyu's pulse and heartbeat. After a while, he suddenly found the result. His expression changed dramatically and he reported in a heavy tone, "Sect master, Wenyu, he can't be saved." "What? Can't be saved?" Chapter 346. After a long while, the Tianjian sect master came to his senses. He stared at Daoist Tianji with bloodshot eyes and asked anxiously, "Daoist Tianji, what happened? Didn't you say that after when you took the fake death pill, as long as he was rescued in time, he would be able to come back to life? How could he not be saved?" Daoist Tianji showed a compassionate expression, shook his head, and sighed. "Alas, sect master, we have delayed for too long. We have already missed the opportunity to rescue him. Moreover, that brat Ji Tianqing was too heavy-handed. I am powerless to reverse the situation. Sect master, please restrain your grief." The Tianjian sect master's face was ashen, and his eyes were filled with deep sorrow and despair. His body was bent as he walked stiffly to the side of Shi Wenyu's body and sat down weakly. The sect master of the Tianjian sect, a heaven origin stage expert, lowered his head and looked at Shi Wenyu's body. 2 lines of clear tears fell from his eyes. When you. Master only wanted to use you as bait to set up a scheme. I didn't really want to kill you. Master has let you down. Daoist Tianji and guest elder Huangfu saw the Tianjian sect master's tear-streaked, grief-stricken appearance, and quietly left the secret chamber. Only the Tianjian sect master and Shi Wenyu's body were left in the secret chamber. The Tianjian sect master held Shi Wenyu's hand and sighed. Wenyu. Your father and I were bosom buddies. Back then, he sacrificed his life to save me, and before he died, he entrusted you to me. For the past 15 years, I have felt guilty in my heart, so I treated you like my own son and cultivated you with all my heart. Who would have thought that in the end, you would die tragically under Ji Tianqing's hands? Master has let your father down. The Tianjian sect master raised his sleeve to wipe away his tears. His eyes were filled with monstrous hatred, and his voice was filled with resentment. Wenyu, don't worry. Master won't let you die in vain. Master will destroy the Sky Pillar sect soon. I will kill Ji Tianqing and Yunyao with my own hands, and use their heads to pay tribute to you. Master will make the Sky Pillar sect pay with their blood, and pay them back tenfold. The Tianjian sect master's body emitted a blazing murderous aura as he spoke, and his eyes were filled with cold light. At the back of the Divine Sword Peak, in a floating palace near a cliff. In the room, Master Tianji, the Daoist Tianji, and Tianji is? At this moment, the door was opened and the white-haired Daoist priest Tianji quickly walked in. Tianji to Tianji. Masters Tianji Tianu, to the Blood Moon Infanta raised her eyebrows and asked in confusion, High Priest, the purity pill you gave Shi Wenyu is clearly a pill that can seal quintessence and reduce his strength. Why did you lie to them and say that it was the death-faking medicine? If I'm not wrong, Shi Wenyu is probably already dead, right? The High Priest nodded and sneered, Shi Wenyu is just an insignificant pawn. Only when he dies can his value be reflected. Humph. The human race is so hypocritical and disgusting. It's obvious that the two sects are like fire and water, but the Tianjian sect still cares about morality. Since that's the case, I'll do them a favor and give them a reason to start a war. Only if Shi Wenyu is really dead can we completely enrage the Tianjian sect master and ignite the flames of war between the two sects. The Blood Moon Infanta suddenly understood the High Priest's intention. She couldn't help but nod with a cold smile. The High Priest is indeed a good strategist. Ji Tianqing killed Shi Wenyu in front of everyone at the Tianjian sect master's birthday banquet. Now that things have developed to this point, I don't believe that the Tianjian sect master can still hold back. The High Priest grinned and revealed a mocking sneer. After a moment of silence, his expression became serious again. He said in a solemn tone, Infanta, please wait patiently. The Tianjian sect and the Sky Pillar sect will soon start a war. When the two sects start a war, it will be the day we rescue the Demon King. The Demon King has been sealed for 1,000 years. After breaking the seal, he will definitely be weak and will need to devour an endless amount of blood to condense the Demon King's true body. Humph. At that time, everyone in the Tianjian sect and the Sky Pillar sect will become sacrifices for the Demon King to condense the Demon King's true body. The Blood Moon Infanta nodded and said expectantly, I really look forward to that day coming soon. It won't be long. The High Priest sneered and walked out of the room. 20 miles away from the Tianjian sect, at the foot of a towering mountain. In the gloomy night, a white light suddenly flashed with a swish sound. After the white light dissipated, a young man and a young woman in white robes appeared on the grassland at the foot of the mountain. These two people were Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. After landing, the two of them turned their heads and looked around, observing the terrain. Yunyao turned her head and looked behind her. Her sharp eyes saw the Tianjian sect and the brightly lit Divine Sword Peak. Tianqing, this place is too close to the Divine Sword Peak. It's only 20 miles away. The Tianjian sect has sent a large number of experts to hunt us down. We must leave as soon as possible. At the same time, Ji Tianqing also saw the terrain clearly. He nodded with a serious expression and said, "Senior sister, there's no time to lose. We must hurry back to the sect and report the news to our master." As he spoke, he took out the 100 treasures brocade pouch and was about to wake Qian Yu up. At this time, Yin Yao took out a jade pendant from her waist and released a huge white spiritual crane. "Tianqing, let's go back on the spiritual crane together. It'll be faster." Ji Tianqing also knew that Qian Yu's flying speed was not as fast as the spiritual crane, so he nodded and agreed. Then, the two of them jumped onto the back of the spiritual crane and flew high into the sky. The spiritual crane flew gracefully in the night sky and rushed back to the Sky Pillar sect at lightning speed. Ji Tianqing stood on the back of the spiritual crane and turned back to look at the Tianjian sect. His eyes were fixed on the brightly lit divine sword peak. Nothing must happen to you. We will come to save you soon," he murmured in his heart. 4 hours later, the spiritual crane carried Ji Tianqing and Yin Yao back to the Sky Pillar sect. It was midnight, and the spiritual crane landed directly on the Qishao peak. After the spiritual crane landed, Ji Tianqing and Yin Yao jumped down and quickly rushed to the sect leader's residence. After the two of them arrived at Chu Tianqing's residence, they reported the situation to the black-robed guard and waited in the study. After a while, the sect leader, Chu Tianqing, hurried to the study. As soon as he entered the study, he asked with a grave expression and a worried tone, "Yin Yao, Tianqing, what happened? Why did you rush back in the middle of the night?" Yin Yao immediately replied truthfully, reporting to Master, "At the birthday banquet of the Tianjian sect leader tonight, the Tianjian sect plotted to frame junior brother Tianqing. They used Sherwin Yu's death as an excuse to kill us." Chapter 347. Upon hearing this news, Chu Tianqing's expression changed dramatically, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "What? The Tianjian sect's master dared to set you up and wanted to kill you all? He even kidnapped Tianqing, what's going on? You tell master." Ji Tianqing cupped his fists and accepted the order. Then, he briefly explained what had happened. When Chu Tianqing heard the entire story, his face was filled with anger. He slapped the desk and smashed it into pieces. "Damned Tianjian sect. Damned Gao Yi. He dared to set up a trap to kill my 3 disciples. Did he eat a bear's heart or a leopard's gall?" Chu Tianqing's whole body was filled with killing intent. He said in a low and stern voice, "The Tianjian sect used to be secretive about their actions. This time, they actually want to go to war. Since they want to fight, I'll meet them. I'll take people to the Tianjian sect immediately. No matter what, I'll rescue At this time, Yin Yao cupped her hands again and said, "Master, I have another thing to report. At tonight's birthday banquet, there was a white-haired old man beside the Tianjian sect's master. I sensed the aura of the demon clan from him." "The aura of the demon clan?" Chu Tianqing's expression changed dramatically, and his face was filled with disbelief. "Gao Yi has the demon clan beside him? Is he colluding with the demon clan?" He knew very well that Yun Yao's heavenly spirit sacred body bloodline was very sensitive to the aura of other races. Since Yun Yao was so sure, it couldn't be wrong. Chu Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment, then asked, "Were the other sect masters present? Did they notice anything unusual? How did they react?" Yin Yao shook her head gently. "The other sect masters were present, but they didn't notice anything unusual and didn't react. That's why I didn't tell anyone when I detected the aura of the demon clan. I immediately escaped from the Tianjian sect with junior brother Tianqing and came back to report the news to you." Chu Tianqing nodded slightly, his expression solemn as he said, "In that case, Gao Yi may not have colluded with the demon race, but may have been used by them. No matter what, since the Tianjian sect dares to openly attack our sect, I will make them pay the price. Yin Yao, Tianxing, rest here for a while, then follow me to the Tianjian sect. With that, Chu Tianxing ordered the black-robed guard to summon the elders and deacons to the heaven-raising palace. Ji Tianxing and Yin Yao retreated to the side and sat down to rest. After the previous battle, Ji Tianxing's true essence had been severely consumed, so he took out 2 pills and swallowed them, silently restoring his true essence. Although his heavenly origin star armor had a strong defensive effect, it consumed a large amount of true essence. With his current strength, he could only use the star armor for about half an hour every time he used it. Therefore, when he escaped from the Tianjian sect, he put the star armor back into the silver ball and put it in his space ring. The heaven-raising palace was dark and quiet. The 3 of them waited patiently. Although it was late at night, Chu Tianxing's order was quickly passed down. After about half an hour, the elders and deacons arrived at the heaven-raising palace one after another. Everyone was in a hurry, their faces full of anxiety and doubt. They didn't know what had happened. After a quarter of an hour, 5 elders and 9 deacons gathered in the heaven-raising palace. Chu Tianxing's face was solemn, and he told them what had happened in a low voice. The elders and deacons were shocked and angry when they heard what had happened. They cursed the Tianjian sect's leader with righteous indignation and vowed to kill the Tianjian sect and rescue Yan Er. Chu Tianxing didn't waste any time. He immediately led the elders and deacons out of the heaven-raising palace and rode on spirit beasts to the Tianjian sect. Ji Tianxing and Yin Yao also rode on spirit cranes and followed the crowd. More than a dozen powerhouses rode on spirit beasts and flew across the night sky as fast as lightning, rushing toward the Tianjian sect with murderous intent. Chu Tianxing's mount was a 4th-stage spirit beast, Dragon Eagle, whose strength was comparable to a powerhouse in the Origin Core realm. The Dragon Eagle was covered with dark red feathers. It was huge, with a wingspan of 40 meters. Chu Tianxing rode the Dragon Eagle and flew at the front of the team. The Dragon Eagle's body was flickering with dark red flames, illuminating the night sky and emitting a violent and overbearing aura. 4 hours later, the crowd arrived at the gate of the Tianjian sect. It was dawn, and the sky was just turning white. 30 white-robed guards were on duty at the gate of the Tianjian sect. They all looked solemn. Suddenly, more than a dozen powerful auras came from above their heads. The guards subconsciously raised their heads to look at the sky and saw over a dozen figures that covered the sky descending from the sky. Swish! 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 16 huge birds landed on the square in front of the gate, bringing with them a raging wind. The ground was in a mess because of the wind, and sand and stones were flying everywhere. When the 2 guards recognized the newcomers, their faces changed. They turned around and ran to the top of the mountain to report the news. Just as the 2 of them turned around, 2 gigantic icy blue palms suddenly attacked them. Bang! Bang! The 2 of them were slapped to the ground, causing them to be seriously injured and pass out. The other 20 or so white-robed guards immediately pulled out their swords and stared at the newcomers with vigilant faces. The elders put away their spirit beasts and walked toward the gate of the Tianjian sect under the lead of Chu Tianxing. Chu Tianxing walked at the front, staring coldly ahead. He ignored the white-robed guards and walked directly to the top of the mountain. His face was as cold as ice, and his whole body emitted a terrifying murderous aura. The 20 or so white-robed guards were intimidated by his murderous aura, and none of them dared to stop him. After a while, Chu Tianxing led the crowd to the top of the mountain and stood in the square in front of the reception hall. Everyone looked around with cold eyes, only to see that the entire hall had collapsed and turned into ruins. The square on the top of the mountain was littered with broken bricks and wood shavings, as well as some broken and deformed lanterns. There were several big pits on the ground and numerous cracks. Chu Tianxing and the elders and deacons didn't see the scene at the birthday banquet last night. But the ruins and the mess in front of them were enough to prove how fierce the fighting last night was and how critical the situation was. At this time, several black-robed deacons of the Tianjin sect rushed to the square with a large number of guards and confronted Chu Tiansheng and the others. Although there were more than 30 guards and they had the advantage in numbers, they all looked dignified and didn't dare to act rashly. Chu Tiansheng ignored the deacons and guards and looked into the depths of the palace. He channeled his energy and let out a deafening roar. Gao Yi! Get out here! His roar, which was driven by the power of the Sky Origin stage, immediately covered a radius of dozens of miles and the surrounding mountains. Chapter 348. At dawn, the Heavenly Sword sect was completely silent. They were still in deep slumber. Chu Tiansheng's earth-shaking roar was like a thunderclap on a rainy night, waking everyone up with a start. In an instant, voices of shock, doubt, and anger rang out from the countless palaces and courtyards on the peaks of the Tianjin sect. After a long time, when the roar that reverberated in the sky dissipated, a dozen dazzling lights lit up in the depths of the palaces on the Divine Sword Peak. More than a dozen experts at the Origin Core stage and above rushed to the summit square as fast as lightning. A skinny figure with an aura as sharp as a sword also condensed a pair of wings with green true essence. He flew down from the sky and landed in the square. Whoosh! This figure wasn't very tall, but his aura was overbearing and sharp. It was the Tianjin sect's master, Gao Yi. He landed on the north side of the plaza. Many elders and deacons who had arrived after him immediately surrounded him, crowding him in the crowd. In a short time, 18 experts from the Tianjin sect arrived and confronted Chu Tiansheng and the others. The Tianjin sect's master was emitting a murderous aura. His face was as cold as ice, and he was clearly in an extremely irritable mood. Before the Tianjin sect's master could speak, Chu Tiansheng angrily glared at him and shouted in a cold voice, Gao Yi. Hand over yen, The Tianjin sect's master looked at him coldly and sneered, Chu Tiansheng. Your disciple killed my disciple, Shi Wenyu, in front of everyone. I must avenge him. You want me to hand over that little bastard? Dream on. Chu Tiansheng furrowed his brows and shouted in a deep voice, Gao Yi, you know very well why your disciple, Shi Wenyu, died. Everyone in the ancient star realm knows about your wild ambitions. All these years, you've been ambitious and vainly trying to replace my Sky Pillar sect. Who knows how many despicable and filthy things you've done in secret. I really didn't expect that you would frame my disciple just to find an excuse to start a war with my Sky Pillar sect. You're truly sinister and despicable, vicious to the extreme. Hearing these words, the Tianjin sect's master was so angry that he laughed and said with a sinister expression, ha ha ha. Chu Tiansheng, you're really twisting the truth and spouting nonsense. Last night at the birthday banquet, your disciple, Ji Tianxing, beat my disciple, Shi Wenyu, to death in front of everyone. Everyone saw it with their own eyes. You actually said that I schemed to frame your disciple. Did you think that I would kill my own disciple in order to frame your disciple? Chu Tiansheng. Don't tell me that you dare to twist the truth and bully my Sky Sword sect just because you're the #1 sect in the Heavenly Stellar region. After the Tianjin sect's master, two men's sect. The Tianjin sect after last night's incident at the birthday banquet, the people from the other sects had left, but the people from these two sects had stayed behind. The Thousand Autumns sect master looked at Chu Tiansheng and said with an indifferent expression, Sect Master Chu, your words are indeed absurd and ridiculous. I was there last night and saw the entire incident with my own eyes. I can confirm that it was Ji Tianxing who killed Shi Wenyu. Moreover, I also saw Shi Wenyu's corpse with my own eyes. He really did die from Ji Tianxing's palm strike. The true martial sect master nodded in agreement and said, I also saw it with my own eyes. I also know that sect master Gao treated Shi Wenyu like his own son and nurtured him with all his heart. If sect master Gao was willing to sacrifice Shi Wenyu's life in order to frame Ji Tianxing, this kind of scheme of exchanging a life for a life is truly unbelievable. It's simply absurd. Chu Tianxing frowned and looked coldly at the Tianjian sect master, the Thousand Autumn sect master, and the True Martial sect master, remaining silent for a while. He thought to himself, Tianxing told me that he didn't have any motive to kill Shi Wenyu. He only used 70% of his strength. It's definitely not enough to kill Shi Wenyu. After Shi Wenyu died, the Tianjian sect's elders and black-armored guards immediately rushed into the hall. These people had been lying in ambush outside the hall, so they must have been prepared. Chu Tianxing had analyzed the situation before and concluded that this was a conspiracy of the Tianjian sect. That was why he had rushed to the Tianjian sect that night. He wanted to question the Tianjian sect master and save Yan Er. At this time, the Tianjian sect master saw that he was silent and shouted, Chu Tianxing, the facts are all here. The two sect masters can also testify. You have nothing to say, right? Chu Tianxing raised his head and looked at him with cold eyes. He shouted angrily, Gao Yi. In order to deal with our sect, you've really schemed. You actually dared to ally with the demon race. Even if you hid it well, who did you think you could hide it from? As he shouted, he coldly glanced at the Daoist Tianji beside the Tianjian sect master. The Daoist Tianji's face was expressionless. He held the silver horsetail whisk in his hand and looked like a Daoist master. The Tianjian sect master and several elders and deacons were stunned for a moment. Soon after, they all revealed cold smiles. Chu Tianxing. I think you've lost your mind because of anger. The Tianjian sect master shouted sternly, you're full of sophistry. In order to shirk responsibility and distort the facts, you can even say such nonsense. Our Tianjian sect is an orthodox sect that has been passed down for hundreds of years. We've always hated the cruel and vicious demon race to the bone. How could we ally ourselves with the demon race? Chu Tianxing. I used to respect you as a person of character, but I didn't expect you to be such a despicable and vicious bastard. You dare to wantonly slander our Tianjian sect. I, Gao Yi, swear to the heavens that if my Tianjian sect colludes with the demon race, I, Gao Yi, will be struck by lightning and die without a burial place. My entire Tianjian sect will be annihilated. The Tianjian sect master's voice was as loud as a bell. He angrily swore in front of everyone, arousing the blood of many elders and deacons. Even the dozens of guards were full of indignation. They stared at Chu Tianxing and the others with righteous indignation. The Thousand Autumn sect master and the True Martial sect master sneered again and again. They looked at Chu Tianxing with eyes full of contempt. Sect Master Chu, I really overestimated you. I didn't expect you to be such a despicable person. Hee, Sect Master Chu, in order to protect your disciples' crime, you didn't hesitate to fabricate lies and fabricate crimes to frame the Tianjian sect. You're really shameless. The Tianjian sect's elders and deacons also angrily criticized Chu Tianxing, cursing him in their hearts for being despicable and shameless. Chu Tianxing's expression was cold, but he didn't refute them. He looked deeply at the Tianjian sect master, then stared at the Daoist priest Tianji for a moment. He thought to himself, judging from Gao Yi's reaction, it seems he didn't know about this at all. Daoist priest Tianji acted like an enlightened expert. If Yin Yao hadn't determined that he was a demon, even I wouldn't have been able to sense a trace of the demon race's aura. No wonder no one else noticed. Chapter 349. The reason why Chu Tianxing had questioned the demon race was to clarify the situation. Was the Heavenly Sword sect colluding with the devil race, or had they been kept in the dark by the devil race and were being used? If the Tianjian sect had really fallen to the point of colluding with the demon race, the consequences would be unimaginable. No matter what, Chu Tianxing would find a way to eradicate the Tianjian sect for the sake of the billions of people in the Tianjin region. But now, it seemed that the Tianjian sect had no idea about this. Not only were Gao Yi and the elders kept in the dark, but even the people from the other sects did not notice anything strange. Chu Tianxing was indeed full of anger and killing intent, but thinking of this, he quickly calmed down. At this time, Yunyao said to him through sound transmission, "Master, this is obviously a conspiracy of the demon race. The demon race set up this scheme to provoke the conflict between the Tianjian sect and our sect, so that the Tianjian sect and our sect will fight and kill each other. Master, this matter concerns the safety of the entire Tianshan region. You must treat it seriously. If our sect and the Tianjian sect fight, both sides will be injured, and the demon race will take advantage of this opportunity to invade. At that time, if the demon race breaks the seal of our sect, the people of the Tianshan region will be plunged into misery and suffering." Yunyao's sound transmission could not only be heard by Chu Tianxing, but also by Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing also quickly said to Chu Tianxing through sound transmission, "Master, for the sake of the big picture, our sect must not fight with the Tianjian sect at this time. Otherwise, it will be exactly what the demon race wants, and they will be able to reap the benefits." Chu Tianxing's face was solemn for a moment, then he nodded and said through sound transmission, "Yes, you two have seen through it very clearly. Master also thinks the same." At this time, the Tianjian sect leader saw that he was silent, so he shouted in a stern voice, "Chu Tianxing. What do you have to say now?" Chu Tian looked at him coldly, and said in a solemn tone, "Gao Yi, regarding the matter of the demon race, this king will not argue with you today. In the future, this king will definitely give you an explanation. I won't hold you accountable for what happened last night for the time being, but you have to release Yen, now." Hearing his words, Gao Yi and the other elders all thought that they had misheard, and their faces were filled with astonishment. A moment later, Gao Yu sneered and shouted, "Chu Tianxing. Have you gone senile? Now is not the time for you to pursue the matter. You have to give me an explanation. If you don't give me a reasonable explanation, my Tianjian sect will suppress your Sky Pillar sect and seek justice for my disciple." Chu Tianxing had to consider the overall situation, so he had no choice but to suppress his anger and ask in a deep voice, "Gao Yi, what kind of explanation do you want?" The true goal of the Tianjian sect master was to use this matter as an excuse to openly and confidently declare war on the Sky Pillar sect. However, in front of the sect masters of the Thousand Autumns sect and the True Martial sect, he couldn't speak his true thoughts. He coldly glanced at Ji Tianxing and immediately came up with an idea. "Chu Tianxing. A life for a life, and a debt must be repaid. This is a matter of course. Your disciple, Ji Tianxing, killed my disciple, Shi Wenyu. I want him to pay with his life. Hand over Ji Tianxing. I want to use his blood and head as a sacrifice to Wenyu's soul in heaven." Chu Tianxing and the other Sky Pillar sect elders' expressions suddenly changed, and their eyes were filled with anger. "You want me to hand over Ji Tianxing? Impossible. Gao Yi, give up on that idea." Chu Tianxing's expression was cold as he angrily shouted. The Tianjian sect master had long expected that Chu Tianxing wouldn't agree, and this was exactly what he wanted. He angrily shouted, "Everyone can see that it's not the Tianjian sect that's being aggressive, but Chu Tianxing who is being rude and unreasonable, using his power to bully others. Chu Tianxing. Since you're not willing to compromise, then we have nothing to talk about. Go back to the Sky Pillar sect and wait. My Tianjian sect's elite troops will slaughter their way to the Sky Pillar sect in a few days and demand justice." The negotiations between the Tianjian sect master and Chu Tianxing had broken down, and the two sects were like fire and water, about to officially go to war. At this time, Ji Tianxing suddenly stepped forward and stood in front of the Sky Pillar sect's people. He expressionlessly looked at the Tianjian sect master and said in a solemn tone, "Sect Master Gao, every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. Since Shi Wenyu died because of me, and you insist that I killed him, then I'll pay with my life and settle this grudge. In front of all the sect masters, I, Ji Tianxing, will take your palm. After this palm, if I die, I'll pay with my life for Shi Wenyu's. If I'm still alive, then we'll settle this grudge. This matter will end here, and the Tianjian sect won't continue to pester me." What do you think? Ji Tianqing's voice was sonorous and resonated throughout the entire mountain peak like a great bell. After hearing his words, the faces of the dozens of martial artists present changed dramatically, and they all cried out in alarm. Chu Tiansheng, Yun Yao, and the others' faces changed dramatically, and they hurriedly tried to dissuade him. Tianqing. Don't be reckless. Junior brother Tianqing, you absolutely can't do this. You'll die. Tianqing, Gao Yi is a Sky Origin stage expert. He can smash a mountain with his full strength. How can you block it? Absolutely not. Tianqing, you're the mainstay of our Sky Pillar sect. You're our future hope and a top genius. How can you use your life to pay for Shirwenyu's? The Tianjian sect master and the others all had complicated expressions on their faces as they discussed this matter incessantly. Ji Tianqing is indeed young and impetuous. He doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Humph. This brat is so arrogant. He's digging his own grave. He's just a Tongxian stage martial artist. Even a mountain wouldn't be able to block Sect Master Gao's palm. Sect Master Gao, since Ji Tianqing wants to die, then you should fulfill his wish. Kill him to appease Shirwenyu's soul in heaven. The Tianjian sect master frowned as he pondered. His face was somewhat ferocious. His original intention was not as simple as killing Ji Tianqing. He wanted to destroy the entire Sky Pillar sect. However, Ji Tianqing had stepped forward bravely and proposed this method in front of everyone, immediately disrupting his plans. If he didn't accept it, then it would be clear that he would continue to pester them and use Shirwenyu's death as an excuse to attack the Sky Pillar sect. In this way, the Tianjian sect wouldn't be in the right and wouldn't be able to gather the other sects to besiege the Sky Pillar sect. However, if he accepted this method, he would at most be able to kill Ji Tianqing with a single palm to avenge Shirwenyu. After Ji Tianqing died, this matter would be settled. The Tianjian sect would have no reason to declare war on the Sky Pillar sect. For a moment, the Tianjian sect master was caught in a dilemma. It was difficult to choose. At this time, Chu Tian looked at Ji Tianqing with a solemn expression and said in a solemn tone, Tianqing. Master forbids you from making this decision on your own. Yen is Master's disciple. You are also Master's disciple. Master will never let anything happen to either of you. Ji Tianqing also said in a solemn tone, Master, this is the best way to resolve the grievances between the two sects and maintain the overall situation. Chapter 350. Chu Tian looked at Ji Tianqing with a solemn expression. His mood suddenly became very complicated. He felt gratified and happy, but he was also full of worry. He sighed silently in his heart. Sigh. Tianqing, oh Tianqing, you're only a 17-year-old boy. How can you be so outstanding? You're talented, righteous, calm, and wise. You're brave and resourceful. You're only 17 years old. Why do you have to shoulder such a heavy grudge and shoulder such a heavy responsibility at such a time of crisis? You've only been in the sect for less than half a year, but you have the courage and responsibility to stand shoulder to shoulder with Yun Yao. If something were to happen to you, how could Master not be heartbroken? Chu Tian had lived for more than 100 years. In his life, he had met many different kinds of people and seen many talented geniuses. However, there were only a dozen people who could catch his eye, and Ji Tianqing was one of them. He valued Ji Tianqing not only because of Ji Tianqing's outstanding talent, but also because of Ji Tianqing's heart. He saw through Ji Tianqing very clearly. Not only did he have outstanding talent, but his martial heart was also very firm, calm, and wise. Most importantly, in this merciless world of martial arts, most people were heartless, selfish, and regarded other people's lives as nothing more than grass. However, Ji Tianqing could still maintain his original heart. He was upright, kind, and righteous. He also had the chivalrous demeanor of helping the world. This was really rare and commendable. Chu Tiantian's mood became heavier and heavier. He felt even more ashamed of Ji Tianqing. The grudge between the Tianjian sect and the Sky Pillar sect, the overall situation of the ancient Star Realm and the Tianqian territory, these were things that he and the elders of the Sky Pillar sect should be worried about. In the end, he and the elders were helpless. Ji Tianqing had to step forward bravely and sacrifice himself to resolve the grudge. Thinking of this, Chu Tian secretly made up his mind. If Ji Tianqing could survive this calamity, he would definitely nurture Ji Tianqing into the next sect master of the Sky Pillar sect. If Ji Tianqing was killed by Gao Yi, he would bury Ji Tianqing with the highest ceremony and treat Ji Tianqing's family members well. Because this was what the Sky Pillar sect owed him. He would also make sure that the Tianjian sect would no longer have a foothold in the Star Ancient Realm. At the same time, a purple-robed elder escorted the heavily injured Yan to the crowd in the square. Yan saw Chu Tianqing, Ji Tianqing, and the others. She learned that Ji Tianqing was going to be hit by the Tianjian sect master. He tried his best to wave his hand at Ji Tianqing. With a pale face and a weak voice, he shouted, "Senior Marshal Brother Tianqing. No. I'm the Crown Prince of the Fire Tribe. The Tianjian sect doesn't dare to kill me. Don't worry about me. Just leave." Chu Tianqing, Ji Tianqing, and the others' gazes immediately fell on Yan Seeing that Yan robe was stained with blood, his face was pale, and his spirit was dispirited. Everyone was distressed and angry. Ji Tianqing also couldn't bear it. He said firmly to Yan "Don't worry, Senior Marshal Brother will be fine. I will definitely save you." "No. Senior Marshal Brother Tianqing, don't worry about me." Yan eyes were filled with tears. He desperately shook his head and refused. At this time, the Tianjian sect master finally made up his mind under the instigation of the two sect masters and several elders. When he heard Yan persuading Ji Tianqing, he winked at the purple-robed elder. The purple-robed elder immediately understood. He raised his hand and knocked Yan unconscious. After Yan fell into a coma and calmed down, the Tianjian sect master turned to Ji Tianqing and shouted, "Ji Tianqing. Since you want to die, I will fulfill your wish. Today, I will make you pay with your life for sure when you..." He would find another excuse to declare war on the Sky Pillar sect in the future. But today, he would first kill Ji Tianqing to pay for Sure Wenyu's life. He would also get rid of a top genius of the Sky Pillar sect and eliminate a major threat. With this thought in mind, the Tianjian sect master stepped out of the crowd and came to the square. Ji Tianqing also walked to the center of the square expressionlessly and stood 20 steps away from the Tianjian sect master. "Sect Master Gao, since you have agreed, please remember the agreement. The people of the various sects have witnessed it with their own eyes." The Heavenly Sword sect master sneered with a sinister look on his face. "Cut the crap. Prepare to die." As he spoke, he mobilized his life's cultivation and circulated his majestic true essence, gathering it in the palm of his right hand. At that moment, the Tianjian sect's outer sect elder suddenly walked quickly to the square and said with a solemn expression, "Sect Master, please wait. Let this subordinate examine Ji Tianqing first. He dared to ask to take your palm, so it's very likely that he has some kind of armor or defensive treasure hidden on his body." The outer sect elder's words were exactly what many people were thinking. Many of the Tianjian sect's elders and deacons believed that Ji Tianqing must have something to rely on since he dared to arrogantly propose such a method. Ji Tianqing frowned but didn't say anything. He stood still and allowed the outer sect elder to examine him. However, the Tianjian sect master sneered disdainfully and waved his hand to stop the outer sect elder. "There's no need to examine him. Ji Tianqing is just an ant in the profound comprehension realm. Even if he wears a Tian origin grade armor, it's impossible for him to block this sect master's palm. He will die without a doubt. Not even dregs will remain." The outer sect elder nodded silently and quickly retreated into the crowd. In the next moment, the Tianjian sect master gathered all of his power into his right palm. His entire body burst out with a monstrous killing intent and five-colored brilliance. In the palm of his right hand, a brilliant five-colored true essence also emerged and condensed into a giant five-colored palm the size of a washbasin. An incomparably violent energy burst out, causing a gust of wind to blow across the square. Sand and pebbles flew everywhere. The ground was also trembling. Even the entire divine sword peak was shaking slightly, as if it couldn't bear the heavy burden. Even the originally bright sky was suddenly filled with wind and clouds, and layers of dark clouds appeared out of nowhere. The Tianjian sect master was still accumulating power, and the five-colored giant palm's power was still increasing. He hadn't even launched an attack yet, but he had already created such a frightening vision of heaven and earth. Suddenly, everyone's hearts were in their throats. Chu Tianqing's expression also changed. He shouted with grief and indignation, "Damn it! Gao Yi, that bastard, actually used the secret technique of 5-Chi's unification and wants to use the heaven-shattering palm." The secret technique of 5-Chi's unification was a top-secret technique that could greatly increase one's combat power. Only profound comprehension realm experts who had mastered the 5 elements could use this secret technique to increase their combat power by 2 or 3 times in a short period of time. The heaven-shattering palm was also a profound comprehension realm palm technique. With one palm strike, it could tear apart the sky and shatter mountains and rivers. Its power was incomparably terrifying. With the strength of the Tianjian sect master, even a casual palm strike could instantly kill a large number of profound comprehension realm martial artists. In order to completely kill Ji Tianqing, he actually used the secret technique of 5-Chi's unification and used his most powerful killing move. He didn't give Ji Tianqing any chance of survival. Chapter 351. The people of the Tianjian sect were excited as they waited to enjoy the tragic scene of Ji Tianqing being blasted into smithereens. On the other hand, the people of the Sky Pillar sect clenched their fists in grief and indignation. Their eyes were bloodshot. Suddenly, the sect master of the Tianjian sect roared as he raised his right palm and slammed it toward Ji Tianqing, who was 20 steps away. Sky-shattering palm. "Little bastard, I'll kill you." At that moment, the huge 5-colored palm, which carried a terrifying power that could destroy the heavens and earth, slammed toward Ji Tianqing. He was still expressionless, without the slightest fear or retreat. His eyes were fixed on the 5-colored palm as his nerves were stretched taut to the limit. The moment the sky-shattering palm hit him, a huge black shadow suddenly burst out from his body and soared into the sky. Buzz! A humming sound shook the sky as a huge sword steel, which was thousands of feet tall, appeared. This sword steel was like a cold and lonely mountain that stood in the middle of the square and completely covered the sky. The whole square was plunged into darkness and shrouded in a boundless aura of death. The cold aura of death made the square feel as if winter had arrived. The temperature dropped to the extreme, and everyone felt a chill run down their backs as they shivered. Ji Tianqing's figure was nowhere to be seen. He was completely covered by the domineering giant sword steel that was filled with the aura of death. He was protected by the towering black sword steel as he watched the 5-colored palm hit the giant sword steel. Boom! A loud sound that shook the whole world exploded. The loud sound reverberated across a radius of 100 miles. The entire divine sword peak was trembling and on the verge of collapsing. The terrifying power contained in the sky-shattering palm was completely unleashed, releasing 5-colored flames that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Many martial artists in the square retreated to the edge of the square and protected their bodies with true essence shields. The collision between the 5-colored palm and the black sword steel produced a violent shock wave that formed visible 5-colored air waves that spread in all directions and swept across the entire mountain peak. The ground of the square burst open from the tremors, and huge gullies appeared one after another, extending out dense cracks. The dozen or so palaces and mansions nearby were also shaking because of the blast. Countless cracks appeared on the walls, and countless bricks and tiles fell from the roofs. Even the forests on the mountain peak were swept away by the five-colored shockwave and turned into a mess. Small trees and weeds were uprooted, and towering trees were snapped in half, collapsing with a loud crash. More than half of the divine sword peak was devastated, as if it was the end of the world. Countless disciples of the Tianjin sect fled in terror. Many experts and powerhouses in the square were dumbfounded as they watched this scene. Everyone was shocked by the terrifying power of the heaven-collapsing palm, but they were also shocked by the mysterious huge sword steel that appeared out of nowhere. Daoist Tianji, who was in the crowd, raised his head to look at the black sword steel. His expression changed dramatically, and his eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. Sword spirit. It's the soul of the divine sword. It actually still exists. Could it be in Ji Tianqing's body? At this moment, Daoist Tianji's mood was extremely complicated. He suddenly understood a lot of things, and felt excited about it. The sect leader of the Tianjin sect also looked at the huge sword steel in surprise, forgetting his anger for a moment. After a long time, the five-colored flames that covered the sky and the sun dissipated. The loud noise that reverberated between heaven and earth also gradually disappeared. Only then did everyone see the scene in the square clearly. Only to see that the towering and enormous black sword steel that stood between the heavens and the earth had already disappeared. In the square, which was full of cracks and gullies, Ji Tianqing, dressed in a white robe, was standing tall and straight in the square. His body looked intact, and there were no obvious injuries on his body. It seemed that he hadn't been seriously injured. However, his face was as pale as a sheet of paper, and blood kept gushing out of his mouth and nose, dripping onto his white robe, dyeing it red. He tried his best to stay conscious, and his body trembled slightly. He didn't say a word, and looked coldly at the sect leader of the Tianjin sect. However, he had already suffered extremely serious internal injuries, and his internal organs had been displaced. At the same time, the voice of the sword soul burial of heaven sounded in his mind. Boy, I haven't recovered my vitality yet, and can only help you block 70% of the heaven-shattering palm's power. I've done my best. Burial of heaven's voice was hoarse and weak, and it no longer had the mysterious and domineering aura of the past. Obviously, in order to help Ji Tianqing block that palm, he had exhausted all his strength and was seriously injured. Ji Tianqing replied in his mind, "Burial of heaven, thank you." After resolving this grudge, the Tianjin sect won't be able to start a war with the Sky Pillar sect for the time being. I can still buy some time. I will definitely improve my strength as soon as possible and get the heavenly star bead as soon as possible. Burial of heaven replied weakly, and then fell into a deep sleep. Ji Tianqing looked coldly at the sect leader of the Tianjin sect, and his heart was filled with monstrous hatred. He roared in his heart, "Gao Yi. I, Ji Tianqing, will remember this palm strike in my heart. When I merge with the Kenshin bloodline in the future, I will definitely return today's grudge tenfold." At this time, the people in the square finally came to their senses when they saw Ji Tianqing's appearance. Countless people revealed looks of shock as they let out cries of disbelief. Oh my God! How is this possible? Ji Tianqing didn't die? Even his body is unscathed? This is incredible. What kind of treasure does Ji Tianqing have that could block the full force of a heaven origin expert's palm strike? What is that majestic sword-shaped stone tablet? Even if it's a heaven origin level weapon or treasure, it can't be so indomitable and domineering. No wonder Ji Tianqing dared to block sect leader Gao's palm strike. He has such an amazing treasure on him. That's why he's so fearless. Everyone was shocked, and they couldn't believe or understand it at all. The sect leader of the Tianjin sect couldn't accept this result either. His face was extremely ugly, and his heart was filled with monstrous anger and murderous intent. He stared at Ji Tianqing with resentment and roared hysterically, "Ji Tianqing! How can you not die? You have a secret treasure to protect you today, but sooner or later, I will smash you into pieces and let you die without a burial place." Ji Tianqing looked at him indifferently, and didn't say anything. The next moment, Yunyao rushed to his side like a gust of wind. She looked at him anxiously and cried with joy. Junior Tianqing, you're still alive. That's great. No one had expected that Yunyao, who was always cold and aloof, would lose her composure at this moment. Her clear eyes were also covered with a layer of mist, and her eyes were filled with excitement. Then, Chu Tianqing and several other elders came over to check on Ji Tianqing's injuries with concern. Chapter 352. The enmity between the two sects had been resolved, and Yan had been rescued. Ji Tianqing could no longer withstand his injuries and spat out a mouthful of blood. Puff! He closed his eyes and lost consciousness as he fell to the ground with his face facing the sky. Yunyao, who was the closest to him, suddenly let out a worried cry. She quickly stretched out her arms and hugged him in her arms. Chu Tianqing and the several elders' complexions changed dramatically, and their hearts were in their throats again. The spiritual medicine elder quickly checked Ji Tianqing's condition and transferred his true essence to him to suppress his injuries. Chu Tianqing's face was as gloomy as ice. He turned to look at the Tianjian sect's master and shouted in a deep voice, Gao Yi. This king's disciple Ji Tianqing has taken your palm in public. This matter ends here. If you continue to cause trouble and pester me endlessly, this king will never let you off. The people of the Tianjian sect all thought that Chu Tianqing would leave with the Sky Pillar sect's people after dropping this sentence. But no one thought that Chu Tianqing would shout again in a cold tone, the enmity between our two sects has been resolved. But now, it's time to settle the enmity between you and me. Gao Yi. You want justice for your disciple, sure win you, by hitting my disciple, Tianqing. Now, I want justice for my 3 disciples. You have to take 3 of my moves. Having said that, Chu Tianqing didn't care whether the Tianjian sect's master agreed or not. He strode towards the Tianjian sect's master with a towering killing intent. The Tianjian sect's master's complexion suddenly changed. His eyes were full of anger as he shouted, Chu Tianqing. You're pestering me endlessly. You're being unreasonable. Just now, in order to kill Ji Tianqing with one palm, he used the 5 Qis unification secret art and the heaven collapsing palm, which consumed about 40% of his strength. At this time, he was a bit weak and only had 60% of his strength left. How could he block 3 of Chu Tianqing's attacks? Chu Tianqing sneered with a cold expression. You can get justice for your disciple, but can't I do the same for mine? Reason? Why don't you talk to my fist? Then, he released his spiritual sense, which covered the sky and the earth, and locked onto the aura of the Tianjian sect master. His whole body surged with monstrous true essence. An invisible and majestic pressure immediately spread out in all directions, enveloping the entire square. The faces of the martial artists from various sects on the square suddenly changed. They fled in all directions, trying to get as far away from the square as possible. The ordinary martial artists were running wildly, while the elders and deacons of the Sky Pillar sect were riding spirit beasts and flying into the sky, overlooking the plaza on the mountain peak. In the blink of an eye, all the warriors in the square ran away, leaving only Chu Tianqing and the Tianjian sect master. Everyone knew that the 2 of them were Sky Origin stage powerhouses, one of the top powerhouses in the Tianjin region. The battle between the 2 of them was bound to be devastating, and its power was terrifying. If they didn't leave the plaza in time, they would be killed by the aftermath of the battle. That would be an unjust death. At this point, what was done could not be undone. No matter how angry the Tianjian sect master was, he had to face Chu Tianqing's anger. The Tianjian sect master stood proudly in the middle of the square and shouted loudly, Chu Tianqing. Don't think that I will be afraid of you just because you are the leader of the Tianjin region. You and I will fight sooner or later anyway. Today, I want to see how much real talent you have to be so arrogant. As he spoke, the Tianjian sect master accumulated his life's power and condensed an oval 5-colored light shield around his body. 1,000 peaks of 5 elements shield. This was one of the Sky Origin Stage 5 Elements secret techniques. It condensed the power of the 5 elements and turned it into a light shield with very strong defensive power. Chu Tianxing saw that the Tianjian sect master was facing a great enemy, and he couldn't help but sneer contemptuously. Gao Yi. I will let you see what the real heaven-breaking palm is. The first palm is to seek justice for my disciple, Yun Yao. As his voice fell, he suddenly raised his right hand and gathered 120% of his power in the palm of his hand. A huge 5-colored giant palm fiercely shot out. At that moment, the square within a kilometer radius was dazzled by the 5-colored light. The air in this area was also squeezed out, and the whole square became a vacuum. The invisible and terrifying pressure was like a 1,000-foot mountain falling from the sky, fiercely suppressing the Tianjian sect master. The Tianjian sect master also waved his palms with all his strength, and a pair of huge 5-colored palm shadows blasted toward Chu Tianxing. Chu Tianxing. I have practiced the heaven-breaking palm for 30 years. Do I need you to teach me? You are too arrogant. As his voice fell, he struck out with a pair of giant palms, which collided with Chu Tianxing's heaven-breaking palm. Bang! In the earth-shattering noise, the Tianjian sect master's palm shadows were smashed into pieces and dissipated. The heaven-breaking palm erupted with destructive power, bursting with 5-colored flames that covered the square within a kilometer radius. The Tianjian sect master's figure was instantly covered by the heaven-breaking palm. The 1,000 peaks of 5 elements shield, which was protecting him, couldn't withstand the terrifying power of the heaven-breaking palm and shattered with a cracking sound. The Tianjian sect master's face changed dramatically. He was hit by the heaven-breaking palm and fell to the ground, letting out a painful groan. The violent 5-colored shockwave spread out and swept across the entire mountain peak in an instant. Dozens of palaces and mansions on the mountain peak were razed to the ground in the blink of an eye. Wherever the 5-colored airwaves passed by, the dense woods were minced into dregs. The splendid palaces and mansions collapsed directly, turning into broken bricks and ruins. Not only that, but the whole divine sword peak was shaking violently, as if it was about to collapse. A huge gully appeared on the mountain wall, and a huge amount of rocks and dust fell down from the sky. The ground on the mountain peak was covered with cracks and gullies, and dust rose into the air. After a long time, the dust gradually dissipated. Many warriors hiding in the distance finally saw the situation on the mountain peak square. The square was in ruins and almost didn't exist anymore. It had become a huge pit with a radius of a kilometer. At the bottom of the pit, the Tianjian sect master was lying in a pile of rubble. His body was covered with dust and debris, and his face was covered with dust. He struggled to jump out of the pit and stood at the edge of the square. He cursed furiously, Chu Tianxing. You bastard son of a bitch. You. Before he could finish his words, Chu Tianxing's cold and ruthless roar came from the other side of the square. Gao Yi. Take my second move. This punch will bring justice to my disciple, Yen, Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. As Chu Tianxing's voice fell, a huge golden fist shadow, carrying an unstoppable momentum, blasted toward the Tianjian sect master. If one looked closely, the golden fist shadow condensed into the shape of an ancient divine elephant. Legend has it that in ancient times, divine dragons and divine elephants were the most powerful divine beasts in the world, and were regarded as the symbol of strength. A divine elephant could hold up a star and travel in the vast starry sky. The dragon elephant divine fist that Chu Tianxing used was a set of Tian Yuan level fist techniques that focused on strength. The huge golden fist shadow condensed into an ancient divine elephant that was 100 meters long and 40 meters tall, and instantly drowned the figure of the Tianjian sect master. The Tianjian sect master was injured, and his strength was greatly reduced. He had no time to dodge, and could only condense a shield of vital essence to protect himself. Boom! Another earth-shattering sound burst out, echoing in the sky and shaking the entire Tianjian sect. The golden divine elephant's shadow hit the Tianjian sect master, shattering his vital essence shield in an instant. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell heavily to the ground. The entire divine sword peak shook violently, and the mountain peak completely collapsed. Kacha kacha. Chapter 353. The summit of the divine sword peak had turned into ruins. The few patches of lush forest had long since become bare, leaving only broken branches, withered leaves, and wood dregs all over the ground. Not only that, but the mountain peak with a radius of a few thousand meters had also been divided into dozens of small areas by numerous ravines. The areas close to the mountain had collapsed, causing dust and gravel to roll down the mountain. The loud rumbling continued for a long time without stopping. In the center of the mountain peak, there used to be a magnificent palace. But now, the palace had long since disappeared, leaving behind only ruins. In the middle of the ruins, there was a huge crater. This crater was created by the dragon elephant divine fist. With a rustling sound, the sect master of the Tianjian sect crawled out of the crater. He was in ragged clothes, with disheveled hair and a dirty face. At this moment, he was covered in dust and looked extremely ugly. No one could recognize him just by looking at his appearance. Moreover, he had suffered a serious internal injury from the dragon elephant divine fist. Blood kept flowing out of his mouth and nose, and he staggered a little. Chu Tiansheng. You bastard who deserves to be hacked to death. I'm going to kill you. The sect master of the Tianjian sect stood on the ruins and roared at the top of his lungs. He was so angry that he was about to go berserk. At this moment, Chu Tiansheng's cold voice came from the ruins 100 meters in front of him. Gao Yi. Take my third move. I'll let you see the true five Qis unification. With this strike, I will seek justice for my disciple, Tian Xing. Tian Luo Axe. As Chu Tiansheng's voice fell, in the black clouds above the mountain peak, a giant five-colored palm suddenly appeared, blocking out the sun and covering the sky. The giant palm that was 100 meters wide was obviously formed by Chu Tiansheng using the five Qis unification secret technique. It contained a terrifying power that could destroy everything. Since this move was called Tian Luo Axe, it didn't come down from the head, but from the side. The five-colored palm was like a giant axe that could split heaven and earth. It cut through the layers of dark clouds and fell from the sky to hit the sect master of the Tianjian sect. Boom! Amidst a deafening boom that shook the universe, the five-colored giant palm struck the mountain peak ruthlessly. At that moment, the entire divine sword peak started to shake violently. Countless amounts of dust and gravel collapsed. Not only that, but the entire mountain peak was also split into two halves by the palm. The divine sword peak could no longer withstand the attacks of the sky origin stage cultivators. It was split into two halves and collapsed with a rumbling sound. For a time, the sound of mountains collapsing reverberated throughout the area within a radius of 100 miles. The ground around Divine Sword Peak was shaking violently. The nearby mountain peaks, which were also the territory of the Tianjian sect, started to tremble and shake. They were greatly affected. The destruction of the Divine Sword Peak caused the Tianjian sect's mountain guarding array to be damaged. The array that covered 100 miles of the sky also became fragmented and full of loopholes. Heaven and earth were filled with a thick layer of dust, flying in the air for a long time without dissipating. Countless disciples of the Tianjian sect were scared out of their wits. They ran away from the Divine Sword Peak in fear. Although, after a quarter of an hour, the deafening noise slowly subsided. Only half of the Divine Sword Peak had collapsed. In the end, only half of the mountain peak remained. However, the main peak had been completely destroyed. What was the point of leaving behind 1,000-meter-tall pile of rubble? The martial artists all around witnessed the destruction of the Divine Sword Peak with their own eyes. They were so shocked that they couldn't come back to their senses for a long time. Especially the people from the Qianqiu sect and the Zhenwu sect. They had witnessed Chu Tianqing's terrifying strength with their own eyes. They were so shocked that they felt cold all over, They were very glad that it was the Tianjian sect that had provoked the sky-bearing sect. If it had been them, the foundation of their sect would have been destroyed long ago. At the same time, the sect leader of the Tianjian sect crawled out of the rubble covered in blood. His injuries were extremely severe. His internal organs were severely damaged. He was bleeding profusely from his 7 orifices. His strength had also dropped to its limit. The blood mixed with the dust and turned into a dark red mud that covered his entire body. He lay in the rubble, panting violently. He was like a wild dog that had rolled in a muddy pond. His miserable state was indescribable. At this time, Chu Tianxing condensed a pair of flaming wings and flew above his head. He shouted with a dignified expression, "Gao Yi. 3 moves have passed. Our grievances are settled. However, remember this. My sky-bearing sect has been able to stand in the ancient star realm for thousands of years. Our foundation is not as simple as you think. I am in charge of the Tianjin region. I am willing to let the Tianjian sect stay in the ancient star realm. Only then will the Tianjian sect have a foothold here. Otherwise, if I want to destroy your Tianjian sect, there will be no place for the Tianjian sect in the entire Tianjin region. Today, I am only giving you a warning. If you dare to deal with my sky-bearing sect in the future, I will definitely take your head." The Tianjian sect master lay in the rubble and tried his best to open his blurry eyes. He glared at Chu Tianxing in the sky with resentment and clenched his teeth without saying a word. He finally understood. Although he and Chu Tianxing were both in the heaven origin stage, Chu Tianxing's strength was several levels higher than his. Now that he had fallen into such a miserable state, no matter how angry he would only be humiliating himself. Chu Tianxing coldly glanced at the Tianjian sect master, then turned and flew away with a flick of his sleeve. Swoosh! He flew to the sky 1,000 meters away and came to the side of the elders and deacons of the sky-bearing sect. "Let's go!" Chu Tianxing shouted in a low voice. He released his mount, the dragon eagle, and rode it into the distance. The elders and deacons also carried the unconscious Ji Tianxing and Yan, and rode their spirit beasts to follow Chu Tianxing back to the sky-bearing sect. In the rubble of the Divine Sword Peak, the Tianjian sect master stared at the people of the sky-bearing sect leaving. He was extremely angry and manic. He gritted his teeth and cursed in a low voice. "Chu Tianxing. Sooner or later, I will wring your head off and use it as a chamber pot. I will also kill everyone in the sky-bearing sect, not even a chicken or a dog. Only the blood of everyone in the sky-bearing sect can wash away the humiliation I suffered today." After the Heavenly Sword sect master viciously swore, he forcefully endured his injuries and struggled to get up, limping down the mountain. The Divine Sword Peak was destroyed, and the entire Tianjian sect was in a mess. Countless handymen and disciples rushed over. Many elders and deacons were busy instructing the handymen and disciples to dig up the rocks and clean up the rubble of the Divine Sword Peak. The Tianjian sect master had just taken a few steps when guest elder Huangfu ran over with an anxious face and quickly reached out to support him. The sky-bearing sect is simply arrogant and overbearing. They have gone too far. Sect master, Chu Tianxing controls the entire Tianjin region. It's not appropriate for us to fight them head-on for the time being. Chapter 354. The Divine Sword Peak had been destroyed, and the Tianjian sect was in chaos. For hours had passed, but the sect still hadn't calmed down. Tens of thousands of odd job workers and thousands of disciples were busy cleaning up the ruins of the Divine Sword Peak. Many elders and deacons were present to direct them. The other peaks were deserted, and it was hard to see anyone walking around. In a quiet palace on the peak where the Spirit Beast Garden was located, a woman was standing in a room. The Blood Moon Infanta was in a room. She was standing by the window and gazing outside. She was lost in thought. When the Divine Sword Peak was in chaos, she escaped from the back of the mountain and hid here. Although she didn't know what had happened, she knew that something big had happened in the Tianjin sect. At this moment, the door was opened, and the Taoist Tianji walked in quickly. The Blood Moon Princess was awakened, and she turned her head to look at him. Seeing the Taoist Tianji's strange expression and his eyes shining, the Blood Moon Princess raised her eyebrows and asked, "Great Priest, what happened? Why are you so happy?" The High Priest came to the front of the Blood Moon Infanta and revealed an excited expression. He lowered his voice and said, "Infanta, we are really lucky today." "Ha ha ha," the Blood Moon Princess frowned and looked at him. She was confused and asked, "Lucky? The divine sword peak has been destroyed. Why are you so happy?" "High Priest, what's going on?" The Great Priest smiled and said excitedly, "The divine sword peak was destroyed by Chu Tiansheng. This is the Tianjin sect's business, and I don't feel bad about it. What made me happy is related to the revival of our tribe." The Blood Moon Infanta's interest was immediately aroused. She hurriedly asked, "High Priest, what's the matter?" The Great Priest stroked his white beard and smiled complacently. He said slowly, "Ji Tianqing proposed in front of everyone that he would like to be hit by the Tianjin sect master and use this method to resolve the grudge. However, when the Tianjin sect master hit him, a giant sword steel, which was thousands of feet tall, emerged from his body. I sensed an ancient and special aura from the sword steel. It's the sword soul. The aura of the soul of the divine sword." The Blood Moon Infanta was stunned when she heard the news. It took her a moment to react, and her eyes were filled with shock. "Sword soul? High Priest, do you mean the soul of Kenshin's sword?" "That's right." The High Priest nodded and said playfully, "Princess, do you remember? When we first met Ji Tianqing when we infiltrated the sky-bearing sect, he was locked in a stone room. You entered the stone room to kill him, but a mysterious black hole emerged from his body and devoured most of your power." The Blood Moon Infanta sneered and said, "That time, 60% of my power was devoured. How could I forget that?" "High Priest, do you mean that the mysterious black hole that devoured my power is the soul of the divine sword?" "That's right." The High Priest sneered and said, "When I sensed the aura of the heavenly star bead from Ji Tianqing's body, it was also because of the soul of the divine sword. Ji Tianqing was only a lowly human youth, but he was able to grow so quickly in just a few months because of the soul of the divine sword. In short, the soul of the divine sword was hidden in Ji Tianqing's body, which made him so special." The Blood Moon Infanta finally understood the series of events after hearing the High Priest's explanation. Her eyes were filled with excitement as she waved her fist and said in a deep voice, "I didn't expect the truth to be so unbelievable. Since the soul of the divine sword is in Ji Tianqing's body, I will find an opportunity to capture him. The soul of the divine sword must know the whereabouts of the heavenly star bead and all of Kenshin's secrets." The Blood Moon Infanta couldn't help but rub her fists as she spoke, eager to give it a try. The High Priest glanced at her and waved his hand. "Infanta, you should give up on this plan. Ji Tianqing used the soul of the divine sword to block the all-out attack of the Tianjin sect master. He was only seriously injured and didn't die. Even the Tianjin sect master couldn't deal with the soul of the divine sword. How can you capture Ji Tianqing? Moreover, Ji Tianqing was seriously injured and was taken back by the Sky Pillar sect for treatment. The Sky Pillar sect's people will definitely protect him strictly. You won't have a chance to do anything." The Blood Moon Infanta understood that the High Priest's words were reasonable, and she clenched her teeth in anger. "Then what should we do? We know that the soul of the divine sword is in Ji Tianqing's body, but we can't do anything to him." The High Priest shook his head and revealed an unfathomable smile. "Infanta, I'm treading on thin ice now. I'm carefully sneaking into the Tianjin sect, and I don't dare to leave any traces. You can't easily show yourself, and you can't deal with Ji Tianqing personally. You and I don't have any soldiers or subordinates, so it's impossible for us to accomplish this task. The only thing we can do now is to report to the Demon King and let him make the decision." The Blood Moon Infanta's eyes lit up at the mention of the Blood Demon King. Yes. I have to leave the ancient star realm as soon as possible and return to the headquarters to report this news to my father. With my father's strength, as long as he enters the ancient star realm, he will definitely be able to capture Ji Tianqing and obtain the soul of the divine sword. The high priest smiled and nodded. That's right. It's time to ask the Demon King to come out. We've been planning in the ancient star realm for so long, and everything is ready. We're just waiting for the Demon King to take command. Soon, not only will we be able to capture Ji Tianqing and obtain the soul of the divine sword, but we'll also be able to watch the Tianjian sect and the Sky Pillar sect fight each other. At that time, we can take the opportunity to rescue the Demon King and massacre the ancient star realm. When the sun was high in the sky, Chu Tiansheng and the others returned to the Sky Pillar sect. Several elders sent Ji Tianqing and Yen to the spiritual medicine hall and were busy treating their injuries. Yin Yao did not leave. She stayed by Ji Tianqing's side and assisted the spiritual medicine elder in treating his injuries. Chu Tiansheng also temporarily put aside the matters of the sect and stayed by Ji Tianqing's side. The elixir elder arranged for Ji Tianqing to be placed in a secret room for healing, and let him lie on a cold jade bed. After a while, he found out about Ji Tianqing's injuries. Chu Tiansheng quickly asked, "Medicine elder, how are Tianqing's injuries?" The medicine elder frowned and said in a serious tone, "Tianqing's injuries are too serious. It's already a miracle that he didn't die on the spot. His internal organs are all damaged. His heart was almost shattered, and all the meridians in his body were broken. It's actually so serious?" Chu Tianqing's expression immediately changed, and he narrowed his eyes. Yin Yao also revealed a face full of shock and worry, and her mood became even heavier. The spiritual medicine elder quickly comforted Chu Tianqing and comforted him, "Sect master, don't worry. Although Tianqing's injuries are serious, this old man will do his best and be able to treat his injuries within half a year. Tianqing's cultivation method is very special. It has already tempered his internal organs and meridians to be very tough, far surpassing cultivators of the same level. It's also because of this that he can still save his life. If it were anyone else, they would have died on the spot." Chu Tianqing frowned and ordered in a serious tone, "Medicine elder, no matter how great the price is, you must treat Tianqing with all your might. Let him wake up as soon as possible and recover from his injuries." "Yes." The medicine elder nodded and began to prepare the healing pills, preparing to treat Ji Tianqing's injuries. Chu Tianqing glanced at Yun Yao and saw that she looked tired and her spirit was a little dispirited. He said in a gentle tone, "Yun Yao, you haven't rested for 2 days. So many things have happened during this period. You must be mentally and physically exhausted. Go back and rest." Yin Yao shook her head. Her eyes were still fixed on Ji Tianqing, who was unconscious. She said in a firm tone, "Master, I don't want to rest. I want to see Junior Tianqing." Chu Tianqing saw that her attitude was firm, so he stopped persuading her. He sighed silently in his heart. Chapter 355. 10 days passed by very quickly. In these 10 days, the spiritual medicine elder had tried all sorts of methods to heal Ji Tianqing's injuries as soon as possible. He had given Ji Tianqing many top-notch spiritual pills and had to use his qi to heal him every day. Yin Yao had also stayed by Ji Tianqing's side and hadn't slept for 10 consecutive days. Even if she was the #1 genius of the Tianshan region and a Yuan Dan stage expert, her body and mind couldn't take it for 12 consecutive days without rest. She sat beside the ice jade bed and laid on the table. She supported her face with her hands and stared at the sleeping Ji Tianqing. Her beautiful face was filled with fatigue, and her clear eyes were also covered with a thick layer of exhaustion. Fortunately, after 10 days and 10 nights of recuperation, Ji Tianqing finally woke up from his coma. He only felt that his head was dizzy and his consciousness was still a little blurry. He slowly opened his eyes. When his eyes could clearly see the things in front of him, he saw a beautiful woman in white sitting at the stone table beside the bed. Although her beautiful brows were slightly furrowed, her beautiful face was filled with fatigue, and her clear eyes were filled with fatigue, making her look a lot dimmer. But in Ji Tianqing's eyes, in his heart, she was still so beautiful. Moreover, at this moment, she wasn't as cold and arrogant as before. Instead, she had a weak feeling that made people feel pity for her. Even if she was an otherworldly fairy, she also had a weak side and a day when she was exhausted. Ji Tianqing stared at her and moved his lips. His voice was weak as he said, "I once read a sentence in a book. When you wake up, the first person you see is also the person you want to see in your dreams. Then she must be the person who cares about you the most." Seeing Yunyao by the bed with a weak light and a tired face, he didn't know why, but this sentence appeared in his mind and he blurted it out. Yunyao, who was in a daze, was suddenly awakened by his voice and immediately came back to her senses. She was stunned for a moment. She looked at Ji Tianqing and met his deep eyes. She saw a complicated and indescribable gentleness in his eyes. "Tianqing, you're finally awake. That's great." Yunyao was a little excited and a gratified smile appeared on her pretty face. She quickly reached out her slender hand and held Ji Tianqing's wrist to check his pulse and body condition. After a while, seeing that his pulse was stable and his injuries had mostly recovered, she let out a sigh of relief. Ji Tianqing lay quietly and looked at her with a smile on his face. "Senior sister, thank you for taking care of me for so long." "Oh right, how many days have I been unconscious?" Yunyao said gently, "You have been unconscious for 10 days and 10 nights. Junior brother Tianqing, please wait for a moment. I'll go get the medicine elder to come over and check your injuries." Ji Tianqing shook his head gently. "Senior sister, there's no need. I can feel that my injuries are no longer serious. Next, I just need to rest for a few days and I'll be able to recover." "That's good." Yunyao nodded slightly. The secret room quieted down. Neither of them spoke and the atmosphere seemed to be a little charming and awkward. Yunyao's expression was normal as if she didn't hear the first sentence Ji Tianqing said when he woke up. But Ji Tianqing was sure that she definitely heard that sentence. This was because her sparkling and translucent earlobes had turned a little red again. After a moment of silence, Ji Tianqing said, "Senior sister, you must be tired after taking care of me for so long. Go back and rest." Yunyao's expression was a little hesitant. "But if I leave, who will take care of you?" Ji Tianqing smiled and said, "Don't worry, my injuries have stabilized. Nothing will happen. Moreover, if something really happens, the disciples of the Spirit Medicine Hall will come and take care of me. Senior sister, after the previous incident, the relationship between our sect and the Tianjian sect has deteriorated. Our sect may have many trivial matters to attend to in the near future. You should go and help Master." After listening to his words of persuasion, Yunyao said goodbye and left. Before leaving, she didn't forget to remind him to focus on healing his injuries. After Yunyao left, Ji Tianqing was the only one left in the secret room. Enduring the pain from his internal injuries, he supported himself with both hands on the frost jade bed and slowly sat up. He used his spiritual sense to check his injuries. After seeing the condition of his internal organs and sword vein, he couldn't help but reveal a trace of surprise. "The burial of heaven helped me block 70% of the power from the palm of the Tianjian sect master, but I still suffered 30% of the power. My internal organs were injured, and several of my sword veins were broken. I didn't expect the sword vein to have such a strong self-healing ability. It healed in just 10 days. Ji Tianqing knew very well that although the spiritual elixir elder's treatment had helped him, it was more due to the sword vein's powerful recovery ability. If it were an ordinary martial artist, even with the spirit medicine elder's painstaking treatment, it would take at least a month for them to recover. Ji Tianqing carefully checked the 9 sword veins in his body and found an even more shocking result. The 8 aperture points on the 8th sword vein had all been refined. His strength had also broken through the 8th tier of the Profound Comprehension realm and silently reached the 9th tier of the Profound Comprehension realm. Not only that, but 3 of the apertures on the 9th sword vein had also been refined. This must be because I desperately unleashed my potential and used my strongest true origin when I was hit by Gao Yi's palm. I was severely injured by Gao Yi's palm, but I also took the opportunity to break through and greatly increase my strength. This should be considered a blessing in disguise, right? Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing's heart was slightly comforted, and his eyes revealed a trace of a smile. Subsequently, he felt an incomparably majestic and terrifying medicinal power accumulating in his body. This was the medicinal power of the elixirs he had taken in the past 10 days that had not been completely refined. If he did not refine it, the medicinal power would accumulate in his body and slowly dissipate with the passage of time. That would be too wasteful. Therefore, Ji Tianqing sat cross-legged on the frost jade bed and tried to refine the medicinal power to heal his injuries. His sword vein had just recovered, and his injuries were still very serious. Logically speaking, he should not be cultivating and could only lie down to recuperate. However, he endured his injuries and the severe pain in his body, and with his tenacious will, he gritted his teeth and persevered. As time passed, his injuries began to heal quickly, and the pain in his body gradually lessened. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. 5 days passed quickly. In these 5 days, Yun Yao, the spirit medicine elder, Chu Tiansheng, and Yen had all come to visit him in the secret room. Everyone saw that he was cultivating, so they did not wake him up and disturb him. 5 days later, when Ji Tianqing ended his cultivation, he had finally refined more than half of the medicinal power that had accumulated in his body. His injuries had recovered by 70%, and he could already move freely. Chapter 356. At this moment, Ji Tianqing's strength had reached the limit of the mystic comprehending stage. He only needed to advance one more step and he would be able to break through the shackles and reach the origin core stage. But unfortunately, he was unable to cultivate the 5th level of the Sword Heart Tao after completing the 4th level cultivation method. The 5th level of the Sword Heart Tao required him to combine the sword embryo, 9 sword veins, and 72 apertures to condense the mysterious and vast sword palace within his body. The so-called sword palace used the 9 sword veins to form the 9 palace formation, and used the sword embryo and 72 apertures as the foundation to increase the power and changes of the sword palace. Once the sword palace was successfully condensed, it would cause the power of true origin to increase by 9 times and possess a myriad of changes and miraculous effects. All in all, the sword palace was a miraculous secret technique that changed the internal structure of the human body and ingeniously combined the human body with the stars. But unfortunately, the cultivation method of the 5th level of the sword palace was obviously not something that ordinary people could cultivate. Ji Tianqing consecutively tried a few tens of times, but he failed every time as expected. In the end, he had no choice but to give up and continue to circulate his cultivation method to heal his injuries. The facts proved that what the Burial of Heaven said at that time was completely correct. He only had a mortal body, and being able to cultivate the 4th level of the Sword Heart Tao had already reached the limit. If he was unable to fuse with the Kenshin bloodline, he would be unable to cultivate the 5th level of the Sword Heart Tao in this lifetime. His strength could only stop at the perfection of the mystic comprehending stage, and he would never be able to reach the origin core stage. Ji Tianqing had already secretly decided to go into closed-door cultivation to heal his injuries for a few more days. After his injuries were healed and his strength recovered to its peak state, he would go to the Dragon Mountain ancient tomb to try to crack the Heaven Origin formation and search for the Heavenly Star Pearl. After all, after he reached the perfection of the mystic comprehending stage, the power of his true origin and true combat strength were comparable to an ordinary 2nd-level origin core stage expert. Perhaps he had a trace of hope to crack the Heaven Origin formation of the Dragon Mountain ancient tomb. In the north of the heavenly stellar region, there was a vast and prosperous area about a few 100 million miles away. This area was the center of the profound sky continent. It was the most bustling and prosperous place, and it was also the sacred land of martial arts where dragon veins gathered and experts were as numerous as the clouds. The experts of the various clans in the profound sky continent called this area was called the Central State. In the southern area of the Central Plains, there was a continuous, lofty, and magnificent mountain range, and it was called the Sky-Pierce Mountain Range. In the center of the sky-connecting mountain range, there was a 10,000-meter tall towering peak shrouded in clouds and mist on top of the Dragon Vein treasure land. This giant peak was called Heaven-Reaching Peak, and it was one of the tallest and most sacred mountains in the world. At the foot of Heaven-Reaching Peak, there was a wide and enormous divine path that extended along the steep mountain to the summit. However, from halfway up the mountain, the Heaven-Reaching Peak was covered by a thick fog. Half of Heaven-Reaching Peak stood in the sea of clouds, like a celestial mountain in the sky. A few magnificent and majestic palaces stood at the peak of the mountain, looking like the palaces of the gods. This was the sacred land of the human race, the most sacred and majestic human imperial court on the continent. There were 3 palaces, 9 halls, and 18 courtyards in the imperial court. Every palace and mansion was built to be huge and spacious, revealing a majestic and domineering aura that could shock the heavens and the earth and suppress the 4 seas. The location of these palaces and mansions implied the mathematical changes of the heavens and earth, the sun, moon, and stars, and the profound principles. Anyone who came before the imperial court would feel a divinity like the descent of the gods, a majesty like the manifestation of heaven's will. They would kowtow and worship with reverence and devotion. The entire imperial court seemed to have gathered the faith of billions of people, the spiritual chi of billions of mountains and rivers. Standing in the sea of clouds, it was as dazzling as the sun. Currently, inside the palace of heaven and earth inside the imperial court, there was a bright, spacious, and elegant study room. A middle-aged man dressed in a golden dragon robe and wearing a purple gold dragon jade crown was sitting before a spacious table. He was focused on reading the memorials and letters. This person had a tall and sturdy figure, with a dignified appearance. Between his brows, there was a sense of righteousness. Besides the domineering aura that looked down on the common people, there was a vast and majestic aura that merged with the heavens and earth. He only sat upright before the table, but he was like a god looking down on the common people of the world. On the vermilion table, there were a few thick stacks of ancient books, memorials, and letters. These were all documents from the various regions of the southern continent. There was also a simple bronze incense burner on the table. Purple wood jade sandalwood burned in the burner, emitting a faint green smoke, causing the study room to be filled with a fresh and elegant sandalwood scent. This rare purple wood jade sandalwood had the miraculous effect of refreshing the mind and cleansing the soul. At this time, the man in the golden robe picked up a letter. Seeing the words Tianshan region at the bottom right of the letter, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. After removing the seal, he took out a piece of golden paper and carefully read the contents. Greetings, Your Majesty. I am now the leader of the Tianjian sect in the Tianshan region. I live in the ancient star realm and protect the common people. However, the leader of the Tianshan region, the Sky Pillar sect, has dominated the ancient star realm for thousands of years. They have done whatever they want, oppressing the common people. I have encountered a great disaster recently. May I be so bold as to report the grievances to Your Majesty and tell you the reason. Without a doubt, the man in the golden robe was the leader of the imperial court, the leader and guardian of the human race on the continent, Emperor Long Xuankuan. After reading the contents of the letter, he put it on the table and couldn't help but frown. After pondering for a moment, he said in a deep voice, Commander Yu, send a message to the imperial tutor. I have something important to discuss with him in the study room. Outside the door of the study room, there was a 2-meter-tall burly man in golden armor. He immediately bowed and accepted the order, then quickly left. Not long after, Commander Yu brought a white-haired old man in a purple robe with a golden horsetail whisk to the door of the study room. This white-haired old man was thin and looked old, but he had white hair and a youthful complexion. He was hale and hearty. His aura was ethereal and mysterious. His body was as vast as the stars and as leisurely as the floating clouds. He was a true master. Your Majesty, the imperial tutor is here. Commander Yu bowed and reported. The Imperial Preceptor held the horsetail whisk and stepped into the study. He bowed slightly to the Emperor and said with an indifferent expression, "Greetings, Your Majesty. May I know what Your Majesty has summoned me here for?" The Emperor didn't say much and handed the letter to the Imperial Tutor. After the Imperial Tutor finished reading, he said in a serious tone, "Imperial Tutor, there are changes in the Tianshan region. The Tianjian sect and the Sky Pillar sect are in conflict. A war is imminent. I think there is something fishy about this matter. What do you think, Imperial Tutor?" The Imperial Tutor put down the letter and stroked his long white beard. His ruddy face revealed an unfathomable smile. "Your Majesty, for the past 10 years, I have been studying the stars on the star-plucking platform and comprehending the mysteries of the heavens. I have long discovered that the demonic qi in the Tianshan region is surging. There must be remnants of the demonic clan causing chaos. It will not be peaceful. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.